I am not really a fantasy girly or a romance girly, so when I saw everybody talking about Court of Thorns and Roses, I sort of thought it didn't apply to me. But I was very wrong. This series is written by Sarah J Maas, who has now announced that she is locked in for at least 2 more books, bringing the running total up to 7. So I thought it was about time I locked in and figured out what all the fuss was about. What a normal person would probably do in that situation is like read the book and maybe talk to their friends about it. So what I did was read the book and then make 40 finger puppets so I can summarise the plot for you guys. Feel free to diagnose me in the comments. And by summarise, I do mean my script is 40,000 words long, 4 times my dissertation. So we are going quite in depth, but the audiobook is way longer and it doesn't have puppets. I would definitely encourage you to read the book, but if you have already read it and want a quick refresher before the new ones come out, or if you want to get a little taste to see if you'd like it, or if you want to read it section by section and then keep coming back to this video like our own little book club, then you're in the right place. Also, I just wanted to say a very quick hello if this is your first time seeing my face. My name is Amy and this is my new-ish YouTube channel that is specifically for like video essays, plot summaries. We're talking about books, we're talking about films, we're talking about theatre and like pop culture in general. The videos for this channel are so much fun to make, but they are also so time consuming. Like this took me months. So if you like what you see, please do subscribe to the channel, send it to your friends, like, comment, push every button you can see because it all really helps me out and means I can carry on making these. This channel is an AI free zone. I do everything the long way, but the way that actually involves a human brain and human creativity because that's really important to me. So thank you for your support and let's get cracking. Before we start, let's just run over a little bit of context. In this world, humans and fairies used to live together. I was going to say in harmony, but not that. The Fae ruled over the humans, employing them as servants or sometimes even enslaving them. There are lots of different species of fairies, but the rulers are the High Fae. They look kind of like humans, but taller and more beautiful with pointy ears and magic powers. They're also immortal. So after centuries of living side by side, about 500 years ago, the humans revolted and a war broke out. After lots of bloodshed, it was decided that the land would be split, with the human territory down south and the Fae territory up north, divided by an invisible wall. A treaty was drawn up with the terms of their truce and they have been living separately ever since. Obviously it's now been literal centuries, so while the immortal fairies remember it as if it was yesterday, on the human side of the wall, the stories of the way things used to be have been passed down like folklore through the generations. North of the wall is the land of Prithian, which is separated into 7 different courts. We've got the spring court, the summer court, the autumn court, the winter court, the day court, the dawn court, and the night court. They're like counties, kind of. And each one is ruled over by a high lord with immense power. There are more fairy kingdoms overseas, but we don't need to worry about them for now. Are you keeping up? Good. Okay, we're setting the scene. We meet our main character, Feyre, in a forest covered in ice and snow. As in the forest is covered, not Feyre herself. She is wearing this rather fetching tunic, as you can see. Her weapon of choice is a bow and arrow. She's freezing, she's starving, she can feel every single one of her ribs, and she's on the hunt for her next meal. Hunting for food for her family is part of Feyre's everyday routine, so she knows what she's doing. She usually opts for deer if she can, but we're in the depths of winter, and she's had to go deeper into the woods than she usually would to try and find one. She doesn't know where exactly, but she's heard rumours that somewhere deep in these woods is the boundary that leads from the mortal world, the one we live in, to Prithian, where no mortals would ever dare to go. There have been whispers throughout the village lately about packs of giant wolves and tall, eerie folk attacking nearby villages. She hopes they're not fairies. We get a bit of internal monologue, which gives us some context about Feyre's life. Her mother died when she was young, and her family used to be very wealthy until her father got himself into a sticky situation with debts he couldn't pay off, and they were forced to sell the big manor house and move into a tiny cottage where she and her 2 older sisters share a bed. Her father had been attacked by thugs, I love that word, sent by the people he owed money to, which had left him with a permanent knee injury. This is her father. He has a cane because he has a knee injury and he is now largely unable to walk or work. So since then they've been living in poverty and Feyre's hunting is their only source of food or income. Her dad hadn't even argued when she announced she was going to start hunting. He actually didn't even look at her. He just let her wander off into the forest where even the most experienced hunters were too scared to go. Fantastic parenting. She used to look forward to the day when both of her sisters were married off and she could live peacefully with her father, filling her days with painting and all the food she could eat. But lately, she hasn't even bothered to think about any sort of future. It's hard to think about anything hopeful when you're always hungry. Her one source of any joy is a stolen hour or two in an abandoned barn with, hold on, Isaac Hale. Who knows what they're doing in there, but she says it's not very serious, just a bit of fun. Maybe they're playing card games or something. Anyway, back to the task at hand. Feyre is admitting to herself that she might have to give up for the day and just try again tomorrow, but she really doesn't want to go home and face her starving family empty-handed. But just as she's about to turn back, she catches a glimpse of a doe a few meters away. So she grabs her bow and arrow. Let's try that again. Technical difficulties. She grabs her bow and arrow and she's starting to aim when she notices a pair of eyes staring at her from across the forest. But it's not just a pair of eyes, obviously, because that would be weird. It's a massive wolf with huge, really menacing, googly eyes. Just go with it. Feyre is frozen in fear. The wolf is so big, it's like the one she's heard all those stories about. She thinks this wolf might actually be a fairy, which makes it even scarier. She's not sure, but she doesn't want to take any chances. She is racking her brains for anything she knows about fairies which could help her. She knows that fairies don't like iron, and apparently they usually can't die because their bodies heal themselves, but if they're stabbed with ashwood, their immortal healing powers don't work and it can actually kill them. Ashwood is really hard to find though, because all the ash trees were burned centuries ago by the High Fae, which is the most powerful species of fairy. They look just like humans, but taller and prettier. Anyway, good thing she has her ashwood arrow with an iron head on her. What a lucky coincidence. She scrambles to switch her arrows over, hoping the wolf is alone, and realising this could be fatal for her if there are others nearby. But if she doesn't kill the wolf, her village could be the next one to be attacked. She just has to do it. The wolf attacks the deer, killing it with ease, and then Feyre shoots. Once in the side and once in the eye. She waits for it to die, and then she skins it, leaves the naked wolf body in the forest, picks up the skin and the dead deer, and legs it back home to their absolute hovel of a dilapidated cottage. To make it very clear, it's absolutely horrendous in here. Let's just do a quick introduction to her sisters. Firstly, we have Nesta. She's the oldest and she's got a serious case of RBF, that's resting bitch face. She's always moody and she's just really not adjusted very well to their fall from wealth. She's jealous of sort of everyone, and she spends money faster than Feyre can physically make it. We don't really hear a single positive word about Nesta. And then there's Elaine, the middle child. She's lovely and pretty and not the sharpest tool in the shed. She also spends the money, but in like a naive, lovely, pretty way, unlike horrible Nesta. The sisters don't offer to help with the food or anything really. Nesta just asks how long it'll take Feyre to do and rolls her eyes when their father congratulates Feyre on a successful hunt. Nesta cannot stand their dad. She blames him for losing all of their money and even more so for not working, which she feels sure he could do despite his injury if he gave it some thought and effort. When Feyre thinks back to the day her father had been attacked by those thugs, both of her sisters had run and hidden, but Feyre had stayed and watched the whole thing happen. She had screamed at the top of her lungs for the thugs to stop and then literally shit her pants. Maybe that was her attempt at getting them out. Screaming wasn't working, so she thought, well, there's only one thing for it. Say what you like about Feyre, but she gets shit done. Sometimes, literally. Anyway, back to present day. Nesta and Elaine bicker over how they should spend the money Feyre will get for the wolf pelt when she sells it tomorrow. Elaine says she'd love a new cloak, but Nesta says she needs a new pair of boots, even though she's got a shiny pair right by the door next to Feyre's, which are too small and literally falling apart. She then tells Feyre that she stinks like a pig covered in her own filth and that she should at least try to pretend she's not a peasant. Feyre nearly snaps back, but instead she reminds herself of the reason she does everything. She had made a promise to her mother while she was on her deathbed that she would take care of her family. Specifically, stay together and look after them. Those were the instructions. And ever since then, everything she's done and all the sacrifices she's made have been for the sake of that promise. Feyre asks Nesta to run a bath and then add some wood to the fire. There are only a few logs left. She says she thought Nesta was going to chop some more up that day, but Nesta gives it, but I hate chopping wood and your hands are already rough, so you do it quicker. That's called weaponized incompetence. Feyre asks her to please chop some wood tomorrow, but she says no. Come on, girl, do something. morning. Feyre cleans herself up a bit and then they sit down for dinner. Nesta and Elaine love a gossip, so they're yapping away, discussing a woodcutter's son, Thomas Mandre, who apparently wants to marry Nesta. This is him, by the way, in the yellow. He's not in this scene, but just like for your mind's eye, this is Thomas Mandre. Feyre points out the irony of Nesta marrying into a wood-cutting family when she can't even chop the wood for their own home. Go on, girl. Apparently, Nesta's friend Claire, you can bank that name for later, told her that he's getting ready to propose any day now. And Nesta's pleased because it means she'll finally have more money. Feyre tells Nesta that she doesn't really approve of Thomas and they can't afford a dowry, but she won't stop her running off if she wants to because the house would be much more peaceful. I suppose it takes the pressure off her if she's feeding them all. Nesta says it doesn't matter if she has a dowry or not because her and Thomas love each other and that Feyre's just jealous because Isaac, her card game partner, is lined up to marry some other village girl with a handsome dowry. Alright, lady, whistle down. Nesta strops off and Elaine, who I forgot was in the scene, runs after her, leaving Feyre and her father to clean up. She tells her dad that he should try and talk some sense into Nesta, but he's quite flaccid. As always, he just gives nothing. The next morning, bright and early, the three sisters trudge into the city, or like the sort of town, the like marketplace area. They haven't actually spoken since last night, but Nesta did get up early to chop some wood, and when Feyre had started shoving the wolf hide into her bag, the sisters had grabbed their cloaks and put their shoes on. It's a market day today, so all the vendors are set up, and Feyre weighs up her options. She has her usual buyers, but there is an unknown woman sitting on the side of a fountain without a cart or a stall. She has scars and carries weapons, and from that, Feyre deduces that she's a mercenary and that she might want to buy some wolf skin, obviously. So Feyre goes over to her, and the mercenary seems distrusting at first, but after Feyre shows her the wolf pelt in her bag, she offers her a price which is way over the odds. Now, the thing about this mercenary character is that she's really set up as if she's going to be important. She's described as a mountain of a woman and seems to know an awful lot about fairies. And to be honest, it sounds like she might even be one herself, but we'll never know because she's barely in it after this. Maybe it's a plot line that was cut in the editing process, I don't know. But basically, she's like a freelance security guard who rich people hire because it makes them feel a bit protected from fairy attacks. And protection from fairies actually seems like quite a profitable business model in this world. At the market, there are several stalls catering to the fear of fairies. Even Nesta and Elaine wear iron bracelets in the hopes of warding them off. You can pay someone for an incantation to protect your house. So even in this fictional pauper village, capitalism is very much alive and well. The mercenary does give us some context about fairies. She says that centuries ago, humans used to be slaves to the High Fae, but they revolted in a catastrophic war. In the end, it was decided with a treaty that the fairies would have the north of the land and the mortals would have the south, divided by a wall. The mercenary mentions those wolf attacks that Feyre was worrying about earlier, saying no one knows what the fairies are planning, but things definitely seem to be getting worse over the last 50 years or so. She tells Feyre that she should stay out of the way if the fairies start turning up, especially the High Lords. They're scary. I hope we never come across them. Nesta's hand clamps down on Feyre's shoulder and she tells her mercenaries are dangerous and she shouldn't be talking with her. Conveniently just after Feyre got all the exposition we need out of the mercenary. Anyway, they've got a big bag of coins and they're off with Elaine. We won't forget her. We haven't left her at the market. Feyre spots Isaac in the distance and he catches her eye and then tilts his head and walks off as if to say, want a game of cards? Follow me. They've been meeting in that barn for over 2 years now, but not really consistently. Sometimes they'd see each other every night for a week, but then not for a month. But when they did, it was always steamy and passionate, which is exactly how I'd describe a good game of Uno. Feyre hands Elaine a few coins and then follows Isaac into their barn. Nesta shouts after her, saying she hopes they're taking precautions. I guess she's probably worried about Feyre getting a paper cut or something, because then it'd be really hard to use a bow and arrow if you got a paper cut from playing cards. Later that evening, the whole family are sat around having another venison dinner. The sisters are showing off what they'd bought with the money, when suddenly the door is busted in and the room fills with ice cold air and snow. Feyre turns to the doorway just in time to see an enormous beast with golden fur, a wolf-like head with huge horns, dagger-like claws, and massive yellow fangs. Feyre throws herself in front of her family, her promise to her dying mother ringing in her ears. The creature rears up and roars the word murderers. And from that she can tell It's a fairy. No way. None of us saw that coming. Their dad pleads with the creature in sort of a snivelling, grovelly way, saying they have no idea what he's talking about. Feyre tries to throw her hunting knife into its throat, but it bats it away like a fly. Nice one, Feyre. That's really going to calm the situation down. The fairy beast demands to know who killed the wolf. The whole cottage shakes, and his massive claws sink into the wood of the dining table. Feyre wonders if he would be able to tell if she lied to him. According to the legends she grew up with, fairies can't lie, so she wonders if it'd be able to sniff out a lie from a human. Probably not worth the risk, but throwing a knife in his throat was. Logic, we don't know her. But maybe she did learn her lesson from the first assassination attempt, because now she decides to try bargaining instead. She asks, if the wolf was killed by mistake, hypothetically speaking, obviously, what payment would they hypothetically be able to offer in exchange? The creature explains that the only suitable payment is the one demanded by the treaty between fairies and mortals. Feyre says, all right, I did it, but the treaty doesn't say anything about wolves. He looks her up and down in disbelief. She thinks he probably thinks she's like way too skinny to be capable of such a thing. She's such a skinny legend, you see. She has to mention it at least once every chapter, those are the rules. He asks if the wolf had attacked her or if she'd killed it unprovoked, and she says, considering what your kind has done to us, it was deserved. Feyre, please, now is not the time for sass. An apology wouldn't go amiss. The creature explains that the treaty demands a life for a life. Any unprovoked attacks on fairies by humans are to be paid for by a life in exchange. Feyre fights back, saying she's never heard of that part of the treaty, but in her mind she knows that fairies can't lie, so he must be telling the truth. Shit. Her family are still sort of all cowering back here. Elaine is like audibly sobbing behind her. The beast goes on to say that there is one other way. He can kill her now, or she has to come back over the wall with him to live out the rest of her days in Prithian. Feyre's father whispers to her to do it, but she just can't keep her mouth shut, so she asks why bother mentioning the loophole. The creature replies, quite rightly actually, that she literally murdered his friend, skinned his corpse, sold it at the market, and then said he deserved it, so he doesn't care what she chooses, but she needs to hurry up and decide. Her dad begs the beast to spare her, but it roars again, louder than ever. Feyre thinks about the promise she made her mum. The only way she can really protect her family in this moment is to go with him, wait until he thinks she's given up, and then slit his throat and run back to them. Seems reasonable. She can't even bring herself to look at her sisters, but she turns to her dad, who has tears in his eyes, and tell him that she left the rest of the money from the wolf's pelt on the dresser. It should last them a while if they're careful with it. She realises now that if her plan doesn't work, she will have left them with no way to provide for themselves. The treaty says a life for a life, but in taking her away, 3 more lives will likely be lost. She turns, what's going on? Elaine's having a wardrobe malfunction. She turns to Elaine, who is crying so much she won't even look at Feyre. And then lastly, she turns to Nesta and says, whatever you do, don't marry Thomas Mandre. His father beats his wife and none of his sons do anything to stop it. Oh, and bruises are harder to conceal than poverty. And then she drops her mic and struts out of the cottage. No, I'm joking. She's actually very scared and worried. The creature leads her to a horse and gestures for Feyre to mount it before leading the way. It's nighttime now, and as they ride through the darkness, she thinks about the fact that she actually murdered a fairy in total disbelief. She can't even bring herself to feel bad about it, considering her whole family have just basically been left to die. She keeps an eye out for ash trees, looking for something she might be able to use as a weapon, but she can't see any. She has no idea what she's heading into. She managed to smuggle a hunting knife in her cloak and really hopes she'll get a chance to use it, although part of her is feeling a bit smug at the thought of her family going hungry and realising how much they relied on her. All right, Feyre, you were crying a minute ago. As they travel, she tries to quiz the creature, asking his name and what type of fairy he is, but he doesn't give her any answers. She goes to ask again, but her mouth fills with a taste of metal and she falls unconscious. At first I thought she'd been punched or like attacked with chloroform or something, but no. In this world, tasting or smelling metal means magic is nearby. Sorry to keep you on the edge of your seat, but I'm just popping in here with a quick word from our sponsor. Feyre's dad was pretty bad with money, but you don't have to be. If you have a mortgage, making overpayments could save you tens of thousands of pounds in the long run. But not all of us have the extra money to make overpayments because we have things to buy, like googly eyes and backdrops. But that is where Sprive comes in. Sprive is a completely free app where you can get cash back on things you were already going to buy, and that cash back can go towards an overpayment on your mortgage. I'm on track to shave a whole month off my mortgage in 2026 alone, just from buying things I was already going to buy, like my weekly shop, my coffee order, clothes, homeware, you name it. Pretty much everywhere I already shop is on Sprive. We'll hear more about Sprive later, but for now you can use my code AmyA5 to get £5 towards an overpayment on your mortgage when you sign up for Sprive and get your first cash back. When she opens her eyes again, Feyre is still on horseback, but they've slowed right down in front of an absolutely massive white stone manor house in the middle of lush gardens full of flowers in every colour you can think of. And it doesn't resemble any other popular well-known buildings, and if it does, that is a coincidence for legal reasons. Anyway, it's absolutely beautiful. The beast approaches the doors to the manor and they swing open before him. Feyre dismounts the horse and she realises the knife that she had been hiding in her cloak was gone, so she feels a bit violated. She considers trying to run, but without knowing the way home, there's just no way she would get away with it. Also, she's really hungry, so she thinks she'll have a better chance of survival after a good meal. Good logic. She follows the creature through the giant doors and into the marble hallway, and then through another, smaller door into a grand dining room. The table is full of food and wine. It looks and smells delicious, but Feyre remembers hearing somewhere that a human should never eat fairy food or drink fairy wine, or you'll be enslaved to them in body and in soul. Apparently. With a flash of light, the horned creature, hold on a minute, turns into a stunning blonde man. Give me a minute. Here he is. A stunning blonde man with pointed fairy ears. He's one of the High Fae, you can tell because of the height difference between him and Feyre. See? Details. He's wearing warrior's clothing, but he doesn't seem to have any weapons. Feyre asks who he is, but he doesn't answer. He just tells her to sit and eat. She says the food isn't safe for humans, but he says it's fine. He tells her she's not imprisoned and that the treaty states she can't leave Prithian, but that doesn't mean she has to stay living with him if she'd rather go elsewhere. Feyre doesn't really seem up for a chat, so he just starts eating. They're joined by another High Fae man, red-haired and masked, with a long scar running from his brow down to his jaw. There's a golden orb in the place of one of his eyes, which seems to spin as if he can still use it. He ignores Feyre at first and aims his questions only at the blonde man. He wants to know if the rumours are true, if a mortal girl actually killed his friend. Once he's heard the truth, he turns on Feyre, asking if she enjoyed being a murderer. The blonde man tells him to calm down and he takes a step back. He reluctantly introduces himself as Lucian, a courtier and emissary. A courtier, and emissary, sure. And if, like me, you don't speak medieval, a courtier is a person who attends a royal court as a companion or advisor to the king or queen, and an emissary is a person who is sent by one group to another as like a representative. He's sarcastic and quick-witted, and he doesn't like Feyre at all. And fair enough, really. She did just kill his friend. A maid taps Feyre on the arm and then gestures for her to follow her upstairs. This is Alice. Feyre's starting to wonder what is up with all the masks. Is it some sort of fashion trend? She follows the maid up the stairs, but she can still hear the men talking in the dining room. Lucian's saying, "We should never have sent him out there. It was a fool's mission." She can't really understand what he's referring to, but she gets it when he suggests they should just dump her or kill her. The blonde man orders that no one is going to lay a hand on her. And then he says, her life in that hovel was hell enough. Okay, listen, we can't all live in a palace, but there's no need to be rude. Feyre feels embarrassed, but ultimately she does sort of agree with him. It is giving hovel. Eventually, she gets far enough away that she can't hear them anymore, and just a few gold and silver corridors later, they reach a huge, luxurious bedroom where she's met by a team of servants who bathe her, cut her hair, and dress her for dinner. At first, Alice tries to put her in a gown, but Feyre says there is no way I'm wearing that because she is not like the other girls. They settle on this second, slightly more upmarket tunic. Alice tells her to sit down while she braids her hair. They get talking and she offers some words of advice. If you're wise, you'll keep your mouth shut and your ears open, and keep your wits about you. Even your own senses can betray you here. she says, and with that she sends Feyre down to dinner. When she enters the dining room, the same two men are in there from lunch. The blonde-haired man who captured her finally introduces himself as Tamlin. Lucien makes snide remarks at both Feyre and Tamlin's expense, really, but one of them is that Tamlin's skills with females have become rusty in recent decades. He looks like he's in his early 20s, so the recent decades comment does give away his age to an extent. Tamlin encourages her to sit down, and then he walks over and starts serving food onto her plate and wine into her cup. She's so hungry and she really wants to eat it, but she knows she shouldn't. Tamlin tells her she looks better than before. Sorry, is that a compliment? A little bit backhanded, but we'll take what we can get. Lucien gives him an encouraging nod. She asks what they plan to do with her now that she's here, but Tamlin tells her she's welcome to do literally whatever she wants as long as she stays out of trouble. She's having a hard time wrapping her head around the fact she doesn't even need to earn her keep or do anything specific, while her family are probably starving to death already. Tamlin tells her that her family are alive and well cared for. He seems offended that she thinks he would take away their only source of income and food and not put provisions in place for them. She knows fairies can't lie, so he must be telling the truth, but she just can't quite believe it. She doesn't want to just take his word for it, so she starts to argue, but just as she stands to her feet, an invisible force slams her back down into her chair and she smells metal. It's magic. Tamlin reiterates that she is welcome to live anywhere in Prithian, but he tells her that if she tries to escape and goes back over the wall to the mortal lands, her family will not be cared for anymore. The best thing she can do for them now is to accept her new life here. And also, the food is not enchanted or drugged or whatever she's worried about, so she should just eat as much as she wants and then get a good night's sleep. Her gut instinct is not to trust him, but once again, she remembers that fairies can't lie, so the food must be fine. At last, she takes a bite of some chicken, and she has never tasted anything this good in her entire life. She eats loads and then eventually excuses herself and says she would like to go to sleep, but Lucien feels like shit stirring a bit more. I'm paraphrasing here, but he sort of says, since they're high fae, they must be so much more stunning and gorgeous than any human man Feyre must have ever met before. So why is she so desperate to get away from them? She turns the question back on him, asking if she's just a silly little human, why do they even want to hang out with her? He asks if she has a suitor back at home, and she says she's close with a man back in her village. There's a joke about like a suitor and a suit of cards in there somewhere, but I can't find it. Tamlin asks if she's in love with him, but she says no. She can't quite believe she's sitting here in this ridiculous manor house with two immortal beings gossiping about her love life. She asks, why do you care? I'm going to be stuck here for the rest of my life anyway. But Tamlin, quite earnestly, says they just want to learn more about her. She asks why he's being so generous, considering she killed their friend. And Tamlin replies that he kills enough as it is, so he can't really hold it against her. Okay, red flag. The next morning, Feyre wakes up early. She's usually out of the cottage by first light, so this whole lady of leisure thing is going to take some getting used to. The house is completely silent until her bedroom door opens with a screech and a thud. Suddenly, Alice is on the floor. She's fallen into a trap Feyre had laid, made out of curtain trimmings. She is fuming, and Feyre's really apologetic. She says she didn't think anyone would be in so early. Alice asks if she really thinks that would do anything anyway if a fairy wanted to attack her. Feyre says it's just to give her enough time to run. Alice kindly reminds her that she wouldn't be able to outrun a fairy anyway. Other maids come in to serve breakfast and run Feyre a bath, while she asks Alice where they actually are. But Alice says all she needs to know is that she's safe in the house. She needs to be a bit more careful if she goes poking around the grounds though. There are plenty of fairies who would have great fun killing a human. So Feyre listens to that and then thinks, I know what I'll do today, I'll go on a walk. Perfect, yeah, great listening skills. She walks through the corridors to find a door to the garden, but just above the staircase, she notices rows upon rows of colourful paintings. She's dabbled in painting a little bit at home, flowers mostly, but these are like nothing she's ever seen before, and there are so many of them. She promises herself she'll have a proper look at them later, and then carries on heading towards the garden, but she's interrupted. Tamlin asks where she's going, and she says she didn't realise she was under house arrest. She's so argumentative. The book says she can't ignore the sheer male beauty of that strong jaw, the richness of his golden tanned skin. It also says he's got several weapons tucked into his belt now, so I'm probably more worried about that than his strong jaw, to be honest. But maybe that's just me. He offers her a tour, but she says no. He seems a bit frustrated that she doesn't trust him, even though he literally ripped her away from everything she's ever known. He assures her that he's not going to kill her because he doesn't break his promises. She asks him why his friend, as in the wolf she killed, was even in the woods that day. Tamlin explains that there's a sickness or a blight across Prithian, which has weakened the powers of all the fairies, his included. It's the reason the house and the lands are so empty. 49 years ago, they were having a masquerade ball and there was a big surge of it, and now the masks are stuck. Side note, new fear unlocked. The thought of having something physically stuck to my face and like in my peripheral vision all the time makes me feel so claustrophobic. Hate that. Anyway, Tamlin confesses that he had actually sent his friend over the wall that day to search for a cure for the blight, but obviously he'd never made it back. Feyre asks if the blight could spread and also affect humans, thinking about her family and her village. Tamlin says, like, I don't know, probably, but there are no signs of that happening right now, so that's a later problem. She spots his yellow claws poking out from his finger skin and looks a bit alarmed, so he puts his hands behind his back and says, I'll see you at dinner, before heading back the way he came. Feyre walks around the gardens, making a mental note of any good hiding spots in case she needs them for the future. Clearly Tamlin has a lot of weapons, so there must be some sort of armoury somewhere on his estate, and if she can find it, maybe she can sneak a weapon or two away without anyone noticing. That being said, she's kind of realising that it actually probably is safer for her to stay where she is for now. There are loads of dangerous fairies about, and now a mysterious disease to contend with as well. At least if she stays in Tamlin's manor, he's ordered everyone there not to kill her. She's starting to think her best chance of escape might be if she can find someone who can help her plead her case to Tamlin and convince him to let her go. She wonders if Lucien could be convinced. He doesn't seem particularly thrilled she's there since she killed his friend, so maybe he would be up for helping her leave. She's thinking all of this while walking around the garden. She can't see a single other person, but sometimes she thinks she can hear footsteps on the gravel. That night, at dinner, she bickers with Lucien, but tries to keep things relatively friendly so she can get him on side. The three of them talk more about her life in the cottage, hunting and caring for her family. They actually seem quite impressed with her hunting skills, which she's quite smug about. When nobody's looking, she steals a knife from the table, and that evening she shoves it in a satchel along with a few clothes and hides it in a cupboard in her room, just in case she ever needs to leave with a moment's notice. The next morning, Feyre asks Alice if she has any idea what Lucien might be up to today, and she tells her she thinks he's on border patrol, so he's probably at the stables getting ready to leave. Feyre hurries through the gardens towards the stables, but she is interrupted by Tamlin once again. This time he makes fun of her, asking if she's laid any traps this morning. He's obviously heard about the one Alice got caught in. She tries very hard to stay calm and says, well, you told me I was safe here, so I listened. He offers to take her for a ride around the grounds, but she says she thinks she'd prefer to spend the day alone. Tamlin doesn't say anything, he just turns and walks back into the house. Lucien is exactly where Alice said he would be. He's sitting on the back of a horse, preparing to leave for the day. When he sees Feyre, he confesses that he's actually quite curious about her hunting skills and asks if she'll indulge him in a hunt. She agrees, obviously. If it's time alone with Lucien she wants, that literally couldn't have gone any better. So they go out into the forest, but not just any forest. As you can see, now we are in the Enchanted Forest. It doesn't really look like this, it's closer to a normal forest, like with all the butterflies and the lanterns and stuff, but I just needed something to differentiate it from the forest that Feyre hunts in at home. Just go with it. We're in the forest in Prithian. They ride around for a while, but she doesn't actually shoot anything. When Lucien asks why, she tells him they already have plenty of food, she doesn't need to add to it. The conversation turns again to the wolf she killed, or not wolf, as the case may be. Turns out Tamlin had just turned him into a wolf with his shape-shifting powers for his trip to the human world. She apologises to Lucien, and this time she really means it. Lucien says he thinks Tamlin knew she was a good person, and that's why he took pity on her. Either that or because she looked so tragic in those rags. He asks when she's going to ask him to ask Tamlin to free her from the treaty. She's stunned and goes to deny it, but he says he's actually quite flattered that he thinks he has that kind of influence. Lucien says that if he had it his way, she would already be long gone. So there's no point trying to convince him to help her. There is no loophole in the treaty. She's just going to have to learn to live with it. They ride around in silence for a few minutes. Feyre decides to change the subject and see if she can get more information out of Lucien. She asks where the rest of Tamlin's court is after they fled this blight on magic, but he interrupts her, saying, how did you know about that? And something about the urgency in his tone makes her wonder if he thought she was talking about something else. How many secrets are they hiding? She asks about the night of the masquerade ball and what caused the masks to get stuck on their faces like that. Lucien tells her that something was sent from the shitholes of hell, but then immediately regrets saying anything. He says he shouldn't say any more in case it gets back to her, whoever her is. He won't elaborate. She then goes on to ask about how magic works in Prithian. Lucien explains that the lesser fairies have specific powers like cleaning everything in sight, or luring mortals to a watery death, or answering any question about the world. But High Fae, like him and Tamlin, don't have specific powers, it's more general. The High Fae are the nobility of the fairy world, and they exist to rule. Feyre asks if there really is a type of fairy that can answer any question, and Lucien says yes, the surial. but you have to trap them. But they're old and wicked and not worth the danger. He seems to be really trying to put her off, which makes Feyre think they actually must live nearby if he's actually that worried about it. Suddenly, Lucian's head spins around as if he's heard something, and his face goes pale. He tells Feyre to put her bow down and look straight ahead. No matter what you feel or see, don't react. Don't look. Just stare ahead. The temperature drops, but she can't see anything except a vague shimmering in the corner of her vision. She can feel the cold circling her, but she works very hard to show absolutely no sign of anything on her face. She hears an ancient, hollow voice, but it doesn't seem to be coming from a body. It sounds like it's inside Feyre's own head. The voice tells her, "Look at me. I'll grind your bones between my claws. I will feast on your flesh. Look at me." But she thinks, nah, that doesn't sound like a very good idea. It keeps whispering scary things to her, and she's got tears streaming down her face, but she holds firm and still doesn't look. Eventually, the voice quietens and Lucian relaxes, so Feyre takes that as a sign that the creature, whatever it was, has moved on. Lucian explains that the creature is called the Bog. You can't hunt it or kill it, even with ash arrows. In its invisible form, it can do no harm, but if you look at it or acknowledge it, it takes a physical shape and then it can kill you. The rest of the day, they keep walking around and chatting about hunting and weapons. They bully each other, but in like a friendly banter kind of way. They arrive back at Tamlin's Manor just in time for dinner, and when they get to the dining room, he's already in there waiting for them. Which is awkward because obviously Feyre told him she wanted to spend the whole day alone and has quite clearly spent it with Lucian instead. He's being a bit passive-aggressive, asking if they had a good day. Lucian tells Tamlin that they'd seen the Bog in the forest, and immediately his whole demeanour changes. His claws shoot out of his fingerskin again and he charges out of the room. Lucian says he's going to kill the Bog, and Feyre says, "I thought you said you can't kill the Bog." And then Lucian says, "But Tamlin can." Ooh. After she's eaten dinner, Feyre goes up to her room for the night. She sharpens the knife she stole yesterday on a bit of stone she'd picked up in the garden and watches out of the window to see when Tamlin comes back, but hours go by and there's no sign of him. Just as she's about to call it a night and go to bed, she sees movement at the bottom of the garden, except it's not Tamlin, it's her father. She shoves the stolen knife into her boot and begins climbing out of the window towards her dad. She can't believe he's actually come to save her. She's terrified of getting caught, but the house seems completely silent. Her dad watches her climbing out of the window and then starts limping towards the outer gate. She hurries after him, and every few seconds he turns round and beckons to her, telling her to hurry. She's only a few feet away when a massive arm wraps around her. Tamlin's claws cut through all the layers of her clothing, and when he opens his mouth, she sees his giant yellow fangs. She pleads with him to let her go with her father, but he tells her to look again, and when she turns back, her father is gone, and in his place is a bow and ashwood arrow, which then ripples and morphs into her sister's. Tamlin growls, and whatever it is disappears altogether. He says she's been warned to stay out of trouble and that her human senses would betray her, but clearly she didn't listen. He reiterates that the woods are dangerous, especially at night, and there are things even worse than the Bog. Feyre argues back, obviously, when doesn't she, and they scrap a bit. She tells him that everything she's ever done has been because of the promise she made to her mother, and now she's being forced to break that promise. He tells her she's not actually breaking it. If anything, she's going above and beyond by staying here because now her family have more food and money than they know what to do with. He thinks that'll make her feel better, but it actually sort of makes her feel worse. Like all the years she spent taking care of them were now completely insignificant. She'd been stupid to even think her father would come all this way for her. She's as insignificant to them now as she is to the High Fae. She's really going all out with a negative self-talk. Believe in yourself, Queen. Tamlin sympathises with her and tells her a bit more about his own upbringing. He was trained as a warrior to serve his dad. He helped patrol the borders for most of his life. Running these lands wasn't supposed to fall to him. He's being quite vague and cryptic, but Feyre doesn't feel like she can press him for any more details. He tells her that the fairy she's just encountered is called a puka. They use your deepest desires to lure you out to somewhere remote, and then they eat you. He thinks they probably smelled her human scent in the forest and followed her back to the manor. He explains that the deadlier fairies like that used to keep their distance, but now the blight has weakened the magic of the High Lords who kept them off their lands. They started testing boundaries. It's not safe to travel alone at night anymore, especially as a human. Over the next few days, Tamlin is nowhere to be seen. He's off hunting the bog. He comes back for dinner every day but doesn't stay for long and leaves again as soon as he's finished eating. Feyre is having terrible, vivid dreams which usually involve killing someone and keep her up half the night. One night, she decides to take advantage of the fact that she's the only one in the manor awake to go and get a better look at those paintings she found before. She's also been drawing a map of the manor. If she's going to live here forever, she at least wants to know her way around, including any hiding places or exits she could use in an emergency. So she walks to the top of the stairs and admires the paintings. A few seconds later, the doors to the garden swing open and Tamlin appears in his beast form. As soon as he sees her, he transforms. Oh my god. Fuck, our string hair is actually going to be the death of me. Do you know how hard it is to get felt that is a good blonde? Anyway, here he is. His clothes are torn as if he's been attacked, but the skin underneath has already healed. He says he's killed the bog, but he's hurt. His hand is dripping with blood with no sign of stopping. He gets distracted for a moment by Feyre's map. He stares at it and then says, "You can't write, can you?" Which is a huge accusation to make just based on one map, by the way. Maybe she's just a visual learner. But in this case, he is right. Feyre can't read or write. Her sisters had a governess back when they had money, but by the time she was old enough, they'd already lost it all. None of her family ever thought to teach her, and they deemed the village school beneath them, so she just never learned. She feels embarrassed, and she doesn't say anything, but Tamlin doesn't seem fazed. He says, "No wonder you became so adept at other things. That's my respectful king." Swiftly changing the subject, she asks where they can go to clean up his hand, and he leads her to a small infirmary. I suppose immortal beings with magical healing powers don't have much of a need for plasters, but she manages to find all the supplies she needs. She cleans and bandages his hand while thinking about how powerful he must be to have killed the bog and walked away with just an injured hand. If this is how powerful the High Fae are, just imagine how powerful the High Lords of Prithian must be. The next morning, Feyre overhears quite a heated conversation between Tamlin and Lucien in the dining room. She hides behind the door so she can eavesdrop, and as a fellow nosy girl, I feel proud of her. I'm going to do a reenactment. This hair is going to be the death of me. "I just want to know what you think you're doing." "Well, what are you doing?" "Me? There isn't much time, and you're just sulking. You're not even trying to fake it anymore. It was a mistake from the start. I can't stomach it. Not after what my father did to their kind, to their lands. I won't follow in his footsteps. I won't be that sort of person, so back off." "Back off? Back off while you seal our fates and ruin everything. I stayed with you out of hope, not to watch you stumble. For someone with a heart of stone, yours is certainly soft these days. Watch your mouth." Feyre accidentally slips. They both spin their heads towards the door. She realises there's no way out of this, so she clears her throat and tries to come up with an excuse. She invites Lucien out for a ride, but he says, "I'm busy." Tamlin will go with you though. Tamlin doesn't seem thrilled at the idea, but he ultimately does agree and says they can go wherever she wants. She doesn't want to go hunting, so they just wander through the corridors instead. He says he forgot to thank her for bandaging up his hand, explaining that the bog's bite was designed to slow down High Fae healing for long enough to kill them. So what he's saying is she's saved his life or whatever. He asks how she learned to bind wounds like that, and she tells him it was just trial and error from when she hurt herself hunting. He asks, "Has anyone ever taken care of you?" But she says no. She doesn't feel sorry for herself, it's just a fact. Then Tamlin pushes the door open and waves his hand, and 100 candles all light up at once. Okay, show off. They're now in an enormous opulent study. Feyre decides she wants to write a letter to her family to tell them she's safe and warn them about the blight. Only one problem. She can't read or write. She asks Tamlin to leave her to it, which he does. She tries to read, and she can make out several words by sounding them out, but there are a lot of words she can't work out. She copies the individual letters down carefully and writes a list of about 40 words so she can look up their pronunciation. She's trying to teach herself to read, basically, and good on her. I don't even know where I would start on that as an adult. She takes breaks for dinner and to sleep, but she returns to the study first thing in the morning, determined to get a message home to her family. She's struggling to even get through a 20-page children's book with lots of pictures, so she's feeling really frustrated and she crumples up her list of words and throws it in the bin. Tamlin appears out of nowhere and offers to help her write to them, but she claps back and says, "Help? You mean a fairy is passing up the opportunity to mock an ignorant mortal?" And he's like, "Whoa, why would I mock you for something that isn't your fault?" But she's too defensive, so they scrap a bit and then she storms off. That afternoon, she comes back to try and get the list of words back out the bin, but it's gone. Later that day, she tracks down Lucien, who tells her Tamlin has gone to sort out some sort of disturbance in the forest. She asks what sort of disturbance, but he shrugs it off and just says, "Unwanted, nasty creatures raising hell," Brilliant, Lucian. Thank you for being so specific. She says she's actually impressed he even gave that much away, but it's too bad he's not like the surial and won't give her whatever answers she wants. She's sort of flirting with him. There's definitely some chemistry between them, in my opinion. But the bullet point version is she asks how to catch a surial, and he says they can be found in the groves of birch trees in the western woods, and they like freshly slaughtered chickens. But they're really dangerous, so take all the weapons you can and be prepared to run like hell. And then he tells her he'll be conveniently hunting on the ground so he can hear if anything starts to go awry. But as far as Tamlin is concerned, she didn't hear it from him. The forest is completely silent except for the birds. It's dense and there's no path. Feyre thinks she's probably the first human to walk here in over 500 years since the treaty. She's back in hunting mode, stealthy and alert, and she's found the grove of birch trees. She lays a snare, sets the chicken as bait, and runs up an oak tree to hide. It doesn't take long before she hears a snap, followed by a blood-curdling scream. She makes her way down the tree and comes face to face with the surial. Suddenly, her bowels turn watery. No, Feyre, don't shit yourself. I know it worked nicely when you wanted the thugs to leave the cottage, but you actually wanted to catch this one. The surial asks if this human had set this wicked trap. She seems almost impressed. Sorry, actually, he. This character has feminine energy to me. I don't know if it's just because I expect all fairies to be girls because I grew up watching Harmony and Rhapsody, or if it's because the surials love a gossip, but no, this is a he. He basically tells Feyre to hurry up and ask her questions so she can let him go and he can be on his way. She asks if there is any way she can go home, but the surial replies no, not unless she wants to be killed along with her family. She asks what the surial knows about Tamlin. He reveals that Tamlin is the High Lord of the Spring Court. I'm so shocked, I never would have guessed that. She asks about the blight and where it came from, and the surial says all she can do is stay close to the High Lord and not to go looking for any more answers. Tamlin will protect her. She also refers to Feyre as Tamlin's human woman, and she can't work out whether she likes that or not. He also tells Feyre that outside of Prithian, there's another fairy kingdom called Highburn. It's not ruled over by several High Lords like Prithian. Highburn is controlled by one wicked, powerful king. I know there was probably a comma, like wicked, comma, powerful, but I was listening to the audiobook, so I'm choosing to believe wicked is the adverb. Like, he's not just powerful, he's wicked powerful. Anyway, he's wicked powerful. His throne is made of human bones and he doesn't answer to anyone. He was absolutely fuming when the High Lord signed the treaty and he had to let all of his human slaves go. And he's decided he's had enough. About 100 years ago, he sent his most trusted and loyal commanders to infiltrate the courts of Prithian as spies. And then, once they'd gathered enough information, he came up with a plan. But nearly 50 years ago, one of his commanders betrayed him. Before Feyre can learn any more, the surial straightens and says, "We're not alone." He tells Feyre the Naga are approaching. They're fairies made of shadow and hate and rot. That's what people say about me. He seems terrified and starts clawing at the snare to try and get away. There are 4 of them, closing in on Feyre and the surial. She loads an arrow into her bow. Oh, yeah, sorry, I forgot to mention that she brought that with her. And pulls it back, carefully assessing where she could send it to do the most damage. She doesn't have any ash arrows, so she just needs a normal arrow to do enough damage to slow them down so she can run. She pulls the string back, screams as loud as she physically can to distract them, and fires the first arrow straight at the snare, freeing the surial. He darts away into the forest as Feyre grabs another arrow. This time it strikes one of the Naga and blood sprays everywhere. Bam! It's dead. While the other 3 are distracted, she sees a chance to run as fast as she can into the forest, putting as much distance between them and her as she can. But before long, she hears them behind her. Her only hope of getting out of here alive is to find Lucian and hope he can help. There are only 3 of them now, but they surround her, taunting her, calling her a scrawny human thing. She tries to swing her bow at one, but he dodges it, and then another one snaps the bow in half, then grabs her by the neck and tells her, "When we're done ripping off your skin, you'll wish you hadn't crossed into Prithian." She grabs a hunting knife out of her boot and jams it into his neck. Bam! Another one down. The next thing she knows, Feyre hits the ground face first, and the last 2 of the Naga are attacking her with their sharp talons. She hears a bone-shattering roar, and Tamlin, in his beast form, grabs one of them and hurls it against a tree, killing it instantly, before tackling the last one and disemboweling it in one swipe. Feyre is quite literally screaming, crying, throwing up. Tamlin explains, sorry, just got a de-beast real quick. Oh my god, I've lost an eye. Okay, ignore the one eye thing. I'll perform surgery in a minute. Tamlin explains that he'd been tracking a pack of Naga through the woods when 4 of them had escaped and they must have followed her scent. He asks what she was doing so deep in the woods, but she sort of feigns ignorance, so he tells her to stay close to the house on days he's called away. I sort of expected Feyre to snap back and reject that, but actually she just says thank you, seeming to accept the fact that she needs him to protect her. She thanks him for saving her life. He says, let's go home, and they walk back in silence. Alice runs Feyre a bath and then insists she has a hot chocolate while she brushes her hair for her. She can tell Feyre's had a long day, but also she berates her. She found out that Feyre had taken a chicken out of the kitchen and she put 2 and 2 together. She tells Feyre that was incredibly foolish, but Feyre explains she was just trying to get information about how to get back to her family. Wouldn't Alice do the same if she had a family? Alice replies, excuse me, young lady, I do have a family, thank you. She explains that she takes care of her 2 nephews after her sister and her mate, I assume that's meant in the procreation sense, not in a laddie way, were killed. Sorry, not funny. 50 years ago. Remember, 50 years old is still young for a fairy. Apparently they don't reach adulthood until around age 75. She also explains that fairy children are extra special because they're so rare. Alice says the next time Feyre needs advice about anything, she should come straight to her instead of to Lucian. Feyre heads down to dinner. This is the first time she's had to really reflect on what the surial said, and she is in absolute disbelief, as we all are obviously, that Tamlin is a High Lord. But she refuses to act any differently around him because of it. When she gets to the dining room, Tamlin and Lucian are already in there waiting for her. She gives Lucian a little nod to let him know she hasn't told Tamlin about his involvement earlier and that his secret is still safe. Although actually, where the fuck was he when she was screaming her head off? Lucian says he's heard they had quite an exciting afternoon and he wishes he could have been there to help. Is that him acknowledging that he should have been, maybe? Suspicious. He then says, well, you still look lovely, regardless of your hell-sent afternoon. Feyre thinks to herself, I've never looked lovely a day in my life. She's not like the other girls, remember? Hold on a minute while I roll my eyes. She says she thought fairies can't lie, and Lucian laughs. Turns out that's just not true at all. Actually, they love to lie. They told the mortals they couldn't, so they would trust them, but that was, in fact, a lie. This basically shatters everything Feyre ever thought she knew about fairies. She asks about their aversion to iron, but they say that's all completely made up too. The Ashwood thing is real though. She wonders if even the surial lied to her earlier. But looking at Tamlin, her gut instinct tells her he is the High Lord. So she knows that bit wasn't a lie. He tells her they've never willingly lied to her. What a weird thing to say. They eat in silence, and once he's finished, Lucian gets up from the table, leaving Tamlin and Feyre alone. He asks what she was doing out in the woods, and she tells him about the surial. He says, you went to catch the surial? He's angry. She says, I caught the surial. Yeah, sorry, don't get it twisted. He asks if she got the information she wanted, but she says they were interrupted before they got into anything too interesting. He can't believe she actually managed to catch a surial. She says, what, like it's hard? They decide on a sort of truce and agree to be friends. Tamlin tells her that for what it's worth, her family knows she's safe. They have no memory of him in the cottage, and they think a very wealthy, long-lost aunt has called on Feyre to go and nurse her on her deathbed. They also know to flee if there are any signs of the wall to Prithian faltering or the blight making its way over. He's glamoured their memories, which is like putting a veil over them. She feels quite sad, actually. Like she's not needed anymore, and her family will probably just forget all about her. In an attempt to cheer herself up, she asks Tamlin for some painting supplies and says she can work to pay for them, but he says there's no need. It might take a few days to track the supplies down, he says, as if maybe someone who lived in the house used to paint but hasn't for a long time. But once he can find them, they're hers, and she's welcome to paint wherever she wants. The next morning, she wakes up in the early hours from a nightmare. In the distance, she can hear shouting and a piercing scream. The shouts aren't aggressive, they're more commanding. She runs out to find the source of the scream, and she sees Tamlin rushing through the doors of the manor with a screaming fairy with blue skin slung over his shoulder. Lucian is already there, and Tamlin shouts at him to clear the table and then lays the fairy face down on top of it. He explains that he, oh my god, I've done it again, I'm so sexist, was attacked just over the borderline. He's from the summer court. The fairy is crying. My wings, she took my wings, whoever she is. Tamlin magics up some steaming water and bandages onto the table, and as Feyre gets closer, she can see it looks like his wings have been ripped off. He's trembling and in shock, and he just keeps saying, She took my wings. I actually teared up during this bit. It was quite traumatic. Lucien can't stop staring and eventually vomits into a plant pot and runs out into the garden. Tamlin and Feyre try to clean him up, but there is still blood gushing out all over the table and onto the floor. Tamlin says his magic isn't strong enough anymore to heal something like this. Not since the blight. It's quite clear the fairy isn't going to make it, but Feyre holds him and comforts him as he dies. The next morning, all signs of what happened the night before have already been cleaned up by the time Feyre leaves her room. Tamlin and Lucien are in the hallway speaking in low voices, but they fall silent as she walks down the stairs. The three of them travel together to the most beautiful place Feyre has ever seen. They refer to this as the Glen, and it's still on the grounds of the Spring Court. It's a big open space. In my mind it's giving the meadow from Twilight, but the best part about it is the pool made of starlight. I'm not sure how that works, don't question it. Feyre asks, "What is this place?" And Tamlin answers, "It's just a glen. Do you like it?" I feel like I'm intruding. Lucien is just laughing at them, and actually, why is Lucien there? This is clearly supposed to be Tamlin making a move. They leave Lucien chilling in the grass while they go for a swim in the pool of starlight. It's potentially a skinny dipping situation. It's not explicitly said, but it does say unclothed, and I take it she didn't pack a bikini. They don't really talk about much of note while they're swimming, apart from Tamlin gives us a bit more information about Lucien's backstory. You may have noticed his colour scheme isn't really giving spring. Lucien is actually the youngest son of the High Lord of the Autumn Court. The throne is inherited not necessarily by the eldest sibling, but by the strongest. And Lucien is the youngest of 7 brothers who all want the title and will do anything to get it. They're very competitive, and not in a healthy way. The good news is that Lucien doesn't really care about the title. He always just assumed it would go to one of his brothers, so he spent his youth doing things he probably shouldn't have, like making friends with the other sons of High Lords and sleeping with fairy women, until one day he met a fairy woman. He was certain the mating bond would set in soon, and he would leave the Autumn Court to marry her. That mating bond thing sounds important for later, but Tamlin doesn't elaborate on it for now. Anyway, when Lucien told his dad about his new girlfriend, his dad deemed her grossly inappropriate for someone of his bloodline and had her executed, while 2 of his brothers held him down and made him watch. Oh my god. Lucien abandoned the Autumn Court and his status of nobility, and then 3 of his brothers came after him to try and kill him, so he could no longer be a threat to the crown. When they reached Spring Court territory, Lucien killed one and Tamlin killed the other. Technically, because that happened on Tamlin's land, as the High Lord of the Spring Court, he was well within his right to kill them, apparently. After that, Tamlin claimed Lucien as his own and made him emissary, since he already had such great connections across the other courts. Feyre asks if Lucien's ever had to deal with his family as part of his emissary duties, and Tamlin says yes. They've never really acknowledged it, so Lucien tries to pretend he's forgotten it all, but he definitely hasn't. Well, yeah, that is the sort of thing that would probably stick with you. Feyre says, "Anyway, what would happen if I drank this starlight water?" And he... Oh, sorry, the back of these puppets is actually none of your business. And he gives some, sarcastic answers, and then she says, "High Lord of Prithian indeed. High Lord of Foolery, more like." Sick burn. And then she lets herself indulge in the glimpse of a broad chest and admire his glorious body honed by centuries of fighting and brutality. Yeah, look at this body. Yummy. He asks how her father lost his fortune. He's guessed that she grew up with money because she's so well spoken, which is a bit presumptuous, I think. She explains to him that her father took a risk to pay off a load of debt and sent all his money overseas in ships to buy spices and cloth that he could sell. But the ships sunk before they ever got there, and all the money disappeared. And we know the rest, with the thugs and things. A little while later, Feyre is sitting with Lucien, and Tamlin is just out of earshot. She almost brings up his family, but she thinks better of it. She thanks him for his help with the surial, and he apologises for not helping her. In his defence, he says he did actually try to find her when he heard her screaming, but she'd gotten a lot further away from him because of the running from the Naga, so Tamlin had gotten there first. Tamlin had told him that Feyre's first shot was to save the surial's life rather than her own, and that seems to have gained her quite a lot of respect from them both. The next morning, Alice shows Feyre all of the art supplies, and she spends literally weeks painting, but never lets anyone see any of them. Sometimes she takes a break to have a walk around the grounds with Tamlin to give her some more inspiration, but mostly she paints from dawn until dusk. Sometimes Tamlin is called away to deal with threats to the borders, and on those days she's too anxious to paint, until he comes back, usually covered in blood but unharmed. As time passes, she feels more and more comfortable with Tamlin, and she regularly reminds herself that the surial said the safest thing she can do is stay close to Tamlin, and she definitely doesn't mind that. Except one day she finds herself thinking about her family and how much time's passed. She manages to convince herself that because she doesn't think of her family very often, Tamlin must have used magic on her to make her forget them, and she decides to pick a fight. She goes to dinner with Tamlin and Lucien, as always, and is moody and passive-aggressive the whole time. And then afterwards she takes herself out to the rose garden, but Tamlin follows her. She tells him she feels so ashamed of herself for leaving her family behind, but she doesn't know why, because even after everything she did for them over the years, they didn't even try to stop him taking her. Oh, it's all bubbling up now. She pricks her hand on a rose thorn and it bleeds, and then he kisses it and his lips are covered in blood. I'm sorry, how much blood is there? Is she okay? When she looks at her hands, the wounds are gone, so never mind. He says he's drawn to her because she's so human. She experiences things so deeply. And then he brushes his lips against her cheek. There's lots of sexual tension. I'm embarrassed. He tells her that one day, when it's safe, there'll be an answer for everything, whatever that's supposed to mean. And then he runs away and Feyre is left to catch her breath. Something seems to have changed between them. The next day, Feyre goes out into the forest to get some fresh air, but Tamlin follows her and reveals that he's written basically enough poems to publish his own anthology using the list of words Feyre had written down that she was trying to learn. Apparently this is supposed to be supportive, but it just sounds like bragging to me. Heh, I know what the words mean. He reads them out to her and they get progressively less family friendly. He's basically reading her soft porn by the end. Just in case anyone was ever considering writing a poem for me, please don't. If that's your thing, I absolutely love that for you. And there are some poems I really love, but this would make me want to peel off my own skin. She sees it as the perfect opportunity for an impromptu therapy session. She asks where his parents are and what happened to them. He's obviously upset when he talks about it. He says his father was probably actually worse than Lucien's, and his two eldest sons were just like him, as in Tamlin's brothers. They all kept human slaves before the treaty, and they all treated them terribly. He spent most of his life out of the way, training to be a warrior, and then his whole family were killed by the High Lord of an enemy court. He doesn't say which one, but he does say the only one he feels even slightly sad about is his mother. He'd lost a lot of his father's courtiers when he'd taken up the role. His moral code was a little bit different, and he wasn't exactly what they had in mind. As they wander around, they reach a clearing in the woods where some fairies are setting up for a fairy holiday, Calamie. The fairies from all the courts come together for this spring ceremony, and the magic they generate fuels Prithian for a whole year. Tamlin tells Feyre the blight has scared many of the fairies away, so there won't be as many as usual. But she still needs to stay out of the way that evening because it could be really dangerous for her. She asks if she can go to the festival with him, but he completely shuts it down and seems really worked up about it, so they walk back to the manor. Just as they get back into familiar territory, Tamlin orders Feyre to stay hidden and to not come out no matter what she hears. He takes off and she hides behind a bush, trying to listen for any clue as to what's happening. She can hear Tamlin and Lucien speaking with this horrible thing she's never seen before. I'm going to do a reenactment again. Oh no, this one. No, wait, no, not Lucien, Tamlin. If she expected bowed heads, then she's more of an idiot than I thought. Speak you so ill of she who holds your fate in her hands? With one word, she could destroy this pathetic estate. Or tell her I'm getting sick of cleaning up the trash she dumps on my borders. She sets them loose as gifts, and to remind you what will happen if you try to break the terms of, he's not, now get out. You may have a heart of stone, but you certainly keep a host of fear inside it. Don't worry, High Lord, all will be right as rain soon. Burn in hell. Ah ha 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 ha. Just try not to overthink my life choices too much, you know. Tamlin comes back to Feyre, and Lucien asks what she heard, but she didn't really hear anything. Nothing she could understand. None of it seemed to make any sense. She's really shaken up by this particular creature. It seems to have been the worst out of all of them. Tamlin calls it the ACOTAR. She's shaking and freezing cold, and Tamlin assures her that the ACOTAR definitely didn't see her, and then tells her to see her at dinner, basically dismissing her. So she walks back to the house, more confused and scared than ever. The staff spend the next 2 days excitedly preparing the food, and Feyre can hear a constant drumbeat in the distance, getting progressively louder as the Calamie celebrations grow nearer. Eventually, literally everyone in the manor disappears, and Feyre can see fires flickering over the hills in the distance, so the celebrations must be starting. The drum is beating even faster and louder than ever, and Feyre feels a pull towards it, as if it has some sort of magical summoning powers. She considers following it, but just as she takes a step towards the door, Tamlin appears, shirtless, Ooh. But with lots of blades and arrows in his belt, not a euphemism. She asks where he's going, and he says that as a High Lord, he has to take part in a ritual called the Great Rite as part of the Calamie celebrations. He doesn't really seem up for a chat and tells Feyre to lock herself in her room and set up a snare. She assumes, based on all the weapons he has, that the Great Rite must be really violent, and he repeatedly begs her to stay safe in her room and not to leave until morning. She actually listens to him for once and does as he says, but then she realises it's 10 p.m, she hasn't had any dinner, and now she's locked in her room with no food. Not even a sweet treat. She can see the fires burning in the distance through her window, and she just thinks, screw it. She follows the sound of the drums to a clearing where there are hundreds of High Fae, but when she tries to look at their faces, they're all swirly. There must be some sort of glamour on them. Some of them are wearing masks, but some aren't, so they must be from other courts. She's got a couple of knives with her for a bit of protection, but let's be so honest, we know they wouldn't do anything really against any of the High Fae. All of the fairies seem to be gathering around one particular cave entrance, which is decorated with loads of flowers. That seems to be the focus of the celebration, but from this angle, she can't actually see what's going on in there. Someone grabs her arm from behind as she spins around to see 3 fairy men standing over her. They know she's human and say they haven't seen one of those in a while. Feyre asks what they want, and they say they're after some fire night fun. Yes, that kind. She tries to step away from them, but they close in on her, so she can't really go anywhere. One of them is holding her hands behind her back, so there's no way she could even reach their knives, not that they'd be much use anyway. They're pulling her gradually away from everyone else, and they're not taking no for an answer. They're all touching her with their bony fingers, talking about how much of an unexpected treat it is to find a human woman here, especially on Calamie. She tells them to get their hands off her, and one of them shoves her to the ground. Suddenly, she is lifted upright by a pair of warm, strong hands, and I quote, deep, sensual male voice she'd never heard before says, "There you are, I've been looking for you." He thanks the 3 men for finding her and tells them to go and enjoy the rite. They scarper away as if they can't escape fast enough. Faye returns to face the man who saved her, and her first impression is that he is the single most beautiful man she has ever seen. The book says everything about the stranger radiated sensual grace and ease. People say that about me all the time. They just stare at each other for a second. He's not wearing a mask, so he must be from another court. And he asks what on earth a mortal woman is doing here on Fire Night, which is another name for Calamie if I haven't already said that. She tells him her friends brought her. He can clearly tell that's a lie, but he goes along with it. This is the first face Feyre has seen in months that doesn't have a mask on. And actually, that must be really isolating. Imagine if you just suddenly couldn't see any facial expressions. I'd convince myself everyone hated me, probably. I'd do that anyway. Anyway, he tells her she's welcome that he saved her. Something about him makes her wonder if she might have traded those 3 slimy creeps for something way worse. It's like she has warning bells ringing inside her head. He asks if he can escort her somewhere, but she says no. Surprisingly, he actually listens to her and tells her to enjoy the rite and stay out of trouble. Feyre returns to the crowd, and as she's looking around, she catches eyes with a fairy in a mask. One eye is red, googly, and the other one is metal. Lucien. Within seconds, he yanks her out of the crowd, slings her over his shoulder and bolts back in the direction of the manor. He is fuming and calls her a stupid mortal. Didn't he tell you to stay in your room? Do you not even know what the Great Rite is? Well, no. Oh, Lucien explains to Feyre that Fire Night signals the official start of spring, and on that night they need to generate enough magic to grow all the crops for the year. This is achieved by all 7 of the High Lords performing rituals called the Great Rite. Basically, what happens is Tamlin allows super powerful magic to take control of his body and mind. He won't be himself when this happens, Lucien explains. It's sort of giving the full moon episodes of H2O Just Add Water, except an adult version. Because this version of Tamlin will have only one thing on the mind. He's going to be looking for a woman to create magic with, if you catch my drift. Fairy sex ritual, sure. It'll all happen quite publicly in the cave, so all of those fairies loitering around there waiting for it to start were there for a reason. The women were there in the hopes of being chosen, and the men were there in the hopes of picking up the ones who aren't. Lucien says Feyre's lucky he found her when he did, because if not, Tamlin would have smelled her and claimed her. I don't like the sound of that. He tells her to stay in her room, no matter who comes knocking, and not to come out until morning under any circumstances. Lucien goes back out to the celebrations, and Feyre actually listens to him and goes to sleep. For a few hours at least. When she wakes up at 2 a.m, everything feels magical. That must mean Tamlin's been shagging. Feyre thinks about how the girl was probably stunning and thrilled to be chosen, and she's not jealous at all. She heads downstairs to raid the kitchen and is on her way to do some painting when Tamlin appears in front of her out of nowhere. He reeks of magic, and when he speaks, he doesn't sound quite like himself. He grabs her wrist and pins her against a wall. He tells her he smelled her and searched for her, but had to choose another woman because he couldn't find her. He bites her neck and then starts kissing it instead. Oh god, okay, this is wrapped up very quickly. And Feyre's having a nice time. Good for her. He tells her to never disobey him again, but she pulls away and slaps him, saying, "Don't tell me what to do." He just laughs and then walks away, leaving Feyre wanting more. The next morning, Feyre makes sure to style her hair and outfit in a way that perfectly shows off the massive bruise on her neck from where Tamlin had bitten her. At breakfast, she expects a big reaction from Tamlin and Lucien, but she doesn't really get one. Tamlin says if she can't be bothered to listen to orders, then he can't be held responsible for the consequences. And Lucien seems to be having the time of his life watching all the drama unfold. In the end, it's Feyre who gets really wound up, calling them both fairy pigs and then running away and painting a picture of them both with pig features. That'll tell him. By dinner time, Tamlin apologises and gives Feyre a huge bouquet of white roses from his parents' garden. She plays it nonchalant, but asks Alice to make sure they're well looked after. The next morning, Feyre goes for a dramatic costume change. She switches out her usual tunic for a beautiful floor-length gown and makes her way to the dining room. But just before she goes in, she feels this wave of embarrassment, like she might be trying too hard. But it's too late now anyway, they'll have already heard her coming. So she opens the door and they both fall silent. Lucien immediately stands up and says he's late for something incredibly important, leaving Tamlin and Feyre alone. The smell of metal fills the air, and suddenly the long table is replaced with a tiny one, so they're sitting much closer together. She asks where the other table went, and he says it's gone to a place called the Between, which is like a broom closet tucked between the pockets of the world, so that clears that up. He's also very sweaty all of a sudden, and says that magic used to be as easy as breathing, but since the blight, it's become a lot more difficult. They flirt with each other while they eat breakfast, and then Feyre tells him she wants to show him something and leads him to the room where she's been painting. She's set up one painting in the middle of the room to show him. She says it's a gift. It's a painting of him, not with the pig features this time, but he's more interested in all the other paintings strewn around the room. Feyre feels self-conscious that he's looking through all the paintings from the last few weeks or even months. He picks up a painting of the forest back near her village, the one where she shot that wolf down, and he says he wants that one. She feels a sudden urge to rip his mask off and see the face underneath, so she asks if there's anything she can do to help with the stuck masks, dull powers situation. He seems shocked that she's even asking, but he says no. All he wants from her is for her to stay indoors where he can look after her and come home to her after a long day of fighting. He says he's had many lovers, including nobility, warriors, princesses. Yeah, okay, we get it, you're experienced. But he didn't really feel like any of them ever actually understood him. He says the forest painting reminds him that he's not alone. Whatever this tactic is, it clearly works on Feyre, because that night, she doesn't lock her bedroom door. The next day, Feyre and Tamlin are sitting in the garden chatting. Feyre keeps looking at, and I quote, the delicate arch of his pointed ears, which is just what I look for in a man. He makes a throwaway comment about how the willow tree singing always makes him feel sleepy, and Feyre's like, that's weird, what do you mean? He explains that as a human, there are certain things she can't hear or see, but he could tune her into it if she wants, for the price of a kiss. She protests as if she isn't literally gagging for it, and he tells her to close her eyes and then plants a kiss on each eyelid. That makes it sound like she has several, just the normal 2 eyelids. The birdsong gets louder in Feyre's ears, and when she opens her eyes, it's like she's just put glasses on for the first time. Everything is clearer than she's ever seen before. And then she falls asleep because the humming of the world made her sleepy. Okay. Tamlin must have carried her to bed because when she wakes up, there is a woman with skin made from tree bark making her breakfast. Sorry, look at that tree bark. I found this foam that was like textured. That's giving tree bark, sorry. She asks where Alice is, and the woman says, are you alright? I literally am Alice. Okay, so it seems like when Tamlin kissed her eyelids or whatever, he removed a sort of glamour she had over her, and now she's seeing things clearly for the first time since arriving in Prithian. She thinks it's probably because when she arrived, she was so scared, Tamlin knew his best shot at getting her to stay was to make everything seem as familiar as possible. So tree bark skin was out of the question. She walks down the hall and sees so many fairies wandering around cleaning and working in the house and on the grounds. She's hardly ever seen anyone else in the manor before, so she asked Tamlin about it, and he explains they've actually been there the whole time. He just made sure she couldn't see or hear anyone who wasn't necessary at first. I'm sorry, can we just stop for a moment and think that through? All that time she thought she was on her own, there were literally hundreds of people around. I would be fuming. They would be fuming, because if I was in an empty manor, there's no way I wouldn't be belting show tunes at the top of my lungs 24/7. That would be so mortifying. He tells her that if she spots any creatures she doesn't like the look of, just pretend she can't see them. It's like when a baby covers their eyes and thinks if they can't see you, you can't see them. What's that gonna do? He also says the blight has been growing again, and things seem to be getting even worse. The next morning, Feyre finds a bleeding fairy head spiked on top of a statue in the garden. Casual. It wasn't wearing a mask, so it must belong to a member of another court. Tamlin and Lucien appear out of nowhere to inspect it. They don't recognise the man, but they do spot a picture branded behind his ear of a mountain with 3 stars, so they assume he's from the Night Court. Apparently that's what that means. Tamlin says the Night Court have corrupt morals and that they live by their own rules. Lucien says they're sadistic killers and would find this sort of thing funny. It's probably a prank from the High Lord of the Night Court. Oh yeah, great prank. A few hours later, Tamlin is called away to one of the borders. He doesn't say where or why, but Feyre gets the impression that maybe the blight is crawling from the other courts towards the Spring Court, and he's trying to stave it off. He's away for the whole night for the first time ever, but he does send Lucien to tell her he's alive. Okay, Mr. Communication, love that for him. When Tamlin finally arrives home the next day, he looks completely unharmed. In fact, him and Lucien are laughing and joking and seem to be in a really good mood actually. Tonight is the night of the summer solstice. They're going to have a big party, and this time Feyre is actually invited to join them. Tamlin plays the fiddle, obviously with the band, and Feyre gets drunk on fairy wine. Feyre gets drunk on fairy wine and spends the whole night dancing and giggling until Tamlin eventually joins her. He then drags her away from the crowd to a meadow and they dance together in private. Not a euphemism. They actually do just dance and they have a little kiss and then they watch the sunrise. Feyre thinks this is the happiest moment of her life. The next morning, Feyre, Tamlin and Lucien meet in the dining room for breakfast as they always do. Except this morning, Feyre and Tamlin are like shamelessly flirting. It's giving get a room, until Lucien tells them that while they were doing whatever they were doing all night, he was on border control. His contact at the Winter Court had written to him to warn him that the blight had managed to kill 24 of their children. Some of the other courts were being hit too, and it seems to be headed this way. Out of nowhere, Lucien draws his sword, as if he's heard something approaching, and Tamlin orders him to get Feyre over to the window. Lucien stands in front of her, and she smells magic, presumably a glamour to make her invisible to whatever is about to arrive. Tamlin sits in his chair, casually picking at his hands, as if nothing is happening. He obviously wants to look completely unbothered. The door swings open, and Feyre recognises the man who walks in. It's the handsome one who saved her on Fire Night. Tamlin addresses the man as Rhysand. They clearly know each other, but they're not friendly. Rhysand says he hasn't seen Tamlin in 49 years, so he wanted to check up on him and see if he got his little present, as in the disembodied head in the garden. He mocks Tamlin for making no attempt to save himself or his lands from the blight, even now that it's getting interesting again. Tamlin doesn't even push back against that, he just says there's nothing to be done. Rhysand continues trying to wind him up. I'll do a dramatic rendition. You might be stubborn, but this is just pathetic. Your dad was a way stronger High Lord than you. Well, what do you even know? You're just Amarantha's whore. Yeah, maybe I am, but not without my reasons. At least I haven't been sitting around doing niche while the world has gone to hell. It becomes clear that Rhysand is the High Lord of the Night Court. Him and Tamlin go back and forth, getting aggressive and in each other's faces and then calming down, but saying a load of stuff that Feyre just doesn't understand. The conversation seems to be finally wrapping up when Rhysand looks down at the table and notices it's set for 3 people. He picks up Feyre's goblet and gives it a big sniff. Feyre smells magic and Rhysand looks right at her, so I assume that's him somehow removing the glamour. He says he recognises her from Calamie and asks Tamlin to introduce them, but Lucien steps in and says that Feyre is his betrothed. They're obviously trying to throw him off the scent and stop him from really learning anything about her. Rhysand says he thought Lucien would still be mourning his commoner lover and to not let his dad anywhere near Feyre. He's such an arse. Lucien spits at Rhysand and draws his sword, but Tamlin orders him to put it away. He then demands Rhysand leaves the manor, but he doesn't make any moves to actually attack him. He's obviously afraid of him for some reason. Rhysand notices the look of utter confusion on Feyre's face. I don't know how to hold this many puppets at once. And he laughs and says, "She doesn't know, does she?" Tamlin warns him again to leave now. Come on, Lucien, keep it together. But Rhys says, if I were you, I wouldn't speak to me like that. Feyre's whole body jolts upright as Rhys takes control of her mind and body with his powers. He says he'd forgotten how easy human minds are to shatter. He then says, she has the most delicious thoughts about you, Tamlin. I'm curious. I can't believe I'm about to say this sentence. Why did she wonder if it would feel good to have you bite her breast the way you bit her neck? Oh my god, I can't do this. Tamlin is raging and he orders Rhys to let her go, but unsurprisingly, he completely ignores his request. He says, if it's any consolation, she would have been the one for you and you might have gotten away with it. A bit late though, she's more stubborn than you are. Then he lets Feyre go and she drops to the floor. Her body wants to scream and cry and vomit, but she tries her best to hold it together. His powers remind me of Jane's in Twilight. This is the second Twilight reference in this chapter. I'll reenact the next bit of the conversation. Amarantha will enjoy breaking her, almost as much as she'll enjoy watching you as she shatters her bit by bit. Please. Please what? Don't tell Amarantha about her. Why not? As her whore, I should tell her everything. Please, 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 please. I'll consider not telling her. If you get down on the floor and beg. Tamlin gets down on the floor without hesitation, bows his head and puts his hands on the ground next to Rhys's boots. Rhys then orders Lucien to do the same and he complies. He says, you're far too desperate, Tamlin. It's off-putting. Becoming High Lord made you so boring. He's still just so unbothered, which is the absolute opposite of Tamlin and Lucien. They are very bothered. He asks Feyre's name. She doesn't want to give it to him in case he could use it to hurt her, or worse, hurt her family back home. So she thinks fast and gives him a fake name before he can reach into her head and find the real one. She tells him her name is Claire Bedder, taking inspiration from her sister's friend's name. Rhys says he looks forward to seeing the three of them under the mountain, whatever that means, and then he disappears. Like, he doesn't walk away, he literally just disappears into nothing. Tamlin orders Lucien and Feyre to leave the room, and he looks like he's not in the mood for disagreements, so they do as they're asked. Feyre goes up to her room, where Alice is waiting with a hot chocolate, and she hears roaring and crashing from the dining room. She doesn't go down for dinner. All she can do is worry about how dangerous this Amarantha woman must be if all the High Lords of Prithian speak about her like that. Tamlin appears at her bedroom door and walks in slowly. He apologises and Feyre says it's fine, but he says it's not fine. He grabs her hand and looks her dead in the eyes and tells her he's sending her home. He's taken on her life debt dictated by the treaty himself. She asks if she's done something wrong. He lifts his hand up to her cheek and tells her she hasn't done anything wrong. She's perfect. But there are people who would hurt her just because of who she is to him, and after today, it's clear he can't protect her as well as he thought. It's best that she goes home, where she'll be safe. Feyre doesn't want to leave. She was miserable back at home, and she wants to stay here with Tamlin, but clearly his mind is made up. She asks how long she has to go for, and he says he doesn't know. She asks if it'll be forever, and he tells her it won't be, but she can tell he's lying. He kisses her and then she pushes him down onto the bed and straddles him. Things get quite heated. It's kind of graphic. You don't need me to give you all those details, thank you. Anyway, after they've finished all of that business, he says, we should sleep. You have a long journey tomorrow. Feyre is shocked at how quickly she's expected to be gone, and the book says, I sat upright, not at all minding my nakedness, not after he'd seen everything, tasted everything. Oh, please, that's none of my business. I'm not good at books like this. He asks her to please just go to bed, and they snuggle up together to go to sleep. Just as she's drifting off, she hears him whisper, I love you. But when she wakes up in the morning, Tamlin is gone, and she's not sure if she dreamed it. Alice helps Feyre get dressed one last time and sends her down to the carriage waiting out front, where Tamlin and Lucien are getting ready to wave her off. Lucien says, you're not even going to give her a few more days before sending her back to that human cesspit? Cesspit's a good word. But Tamlin replies that it's not up for debate. Lucien spits on the ground, ew, and strops off. Tamlin tells Feyre to remember the glamour he put on her family and go along with the story that she was off nursing a sick relative. That's the best way to keep them all safe. Feyre's sort of half listening, but she's mostly trying to memorise his face because she won't see it ever again. She can't really bring herself to say anything romantic or emotional, so she just tells him that all of her paintings are his. He kisses her and promises to see her again. She turns away from him because she doesn't want him to see her cry as she steps into the carriage. Tamlin tells her he loves her, and she knows she should say it back, but the words get stuck in her throat. She's suddenly very aware that he has all the time in the world to find her again because he's immortal, but she's a human and she'll eventually grow old and die. The carriage pulls away and Feyre smells magic and falls unconscious, just like when she travelled through Prithian for the first time all those months ago. When Feyre wakes up, she's travelling down a long, sloping drive towards a very fancy white marble chateau with perfectly maintained hedges and flower beds. It's almost as big as Tamlin's Manor, but not quite, obviously. She's greeted by servants she's never met before. She knew Tamlin said her family would be looked after, but she'd never imagined they'd be living quite so luxuriously. Her sisters appear, wearing fancy dresses too, as you can see. They don't seem to recognise her at first, but Feyre is so pleased to see them. She literally thought she was never going to see them again. Elaine gasps when she realises and asks if Aunt Ripley is dead. That must be the old aunt Feyre has supposedly spent the last few months taking care of. She just nods. Nesta looks her up and down, and then her eyes move to the fancy carriage she arrived in, and she says, "She left you her fortune." She doesn't seem particularly happy about it. Elaine, on the other hand, makes a real fuss of Feyre, saying she's so sorry she had to deal with all that by herself and that father will be devastated he didn't get to pay his respects. Feyre's just pleased this is all her sisters have to worry about. The death of a long-lost family member seems so trivial compared to everything she'd been dealing with in Prithian. Feyre asks what happened to make their circumstances change so drastically. Elaine says, "I wrote to you. Didn't you get my letters?" Feyre says no, but reminds them she wouldn't have been able to read them anyway because someone never taught her how to read. Elaine explains that a week or so after Feyre had left, a stranger came to the door of their cottage and asked their father if he wanted to invest some money. He said yes, which, by the way, seems like a hugely reckless move when you have a limited amount of money left and basically no way of making any more. But whatever, I suppose it paid off. And also, those ships that went missing with all his money on them from years ago had mysteriously turned up, so he got all of that back too. Feyre just can't believe that Tamlin went so above and beyond to care for her family when he really didn't need to. I mean, let's not forget he did effectively kidnap you, but it's okay because he's handsome, so we'll forget that small detail. Nesta is weirdly quiet. She follows her sisters around the chateau while Elaine shows Feyre around and helps her choose a bedroom because there are just so many. Clearly she hadn't married Thomas Mandray after all, thank God. Feyre doesn't know whether to feel relieved or a little bit bitter that they'd gotten on so well without her. Out of the window, she sees the carriage she arrived in, pulling away and heading back in the direction of her real home. She wishes she could run after it, but she knows if she did, it would put Tamlin in even more danger. But a nagging voice in the back of her head reminds her of what the surial had said, that she should stay close to the High Lord. When her father sees her, he weeps and orders a ball in her honour. Perfect, exactly what she wanted. She has to make up a load of stories about her time with Aunt Ripley. She says she read to her daily and nursed her until she died in her sleep a couple of weeks ago. Hold on a minute, I thought you couldn't read. How are you reading her stories? Tamlin had loaded chests of clothes and uncut jewels onto the carriage, which she was passing off as the fortune she'd inherited from Aunt Ripley. They made her even more wealthy than her father, who had made it his job to count the jewels while Feyre settled in. You might be wondering what happened to his cane and his knee injury, but apparently a mysterious healer had come and given him some magic cream, perhaps Charlotte Tilbury, to help with his limp, and he was like a new man. Nesta continues to be really cold with Feyre and everyone really, so she spends most of her time with Elaine in the garden. She gives Feyre the full tour of all the flowers, which she says are from Europe. She looks after the garden all by herself and she's so proud of it. She says she'd love to go to Europe to see where the flowers have come from. Nesta won't go because she's scared of the sea crossing, but Feyre says she'll go with her. She's never really thought about it before, but now that she's not having to spend all of her time thinking about how to keep them all alive, she'd quite like to see more of the world. She's surprised Elaine would want to go at the right time of year to see the flowers though, because it's the middle of the social season, and that seems like the sort of thing Elaine would enjoy. Elaine should watch Bridgerton. A couple of weeks later, Feyre asks her father to make a few bags of coins up, and she goes out to the clearly normal and non-magic forest where she had spent so many years. She goes into the village and hands out bags of cash to the poorest families. She's clearly quite a topic of conversation, with lots of the villagers who used to turn their noses up at her suddenly desperate to know everything about her long-lost aunt. She walks past Thomas Mandray and she overhears him talking to a few other boys about a house that was burned down with a family inside last week. They're trying to figure out whether maybe there might be anything in there worth looting. Scumbag. And then on her way out of the village, she turns a corner and finds herself face to face with Isaac Hale, her ex-card game rival. He's standing next to a woman, his new wife, and they look very happy together. Feyre doesn't feel anything towards him except gratitude for getting her through a tough time. She smiles at them both and they bow her heads back. How mature of everyone involved. Love that for them. There are 2 days to go until the ball in Feyre's honour. Elaine and their father, who is never actually given a name, by the way, have taken charge of it and they are taking it very seriously. Feyre thinks it's all a bit of a waste of money, but she doesn't want to ruin their fun, so she just goes along with it. She helps Elaine with the gardening just for something to do, but she spends a lot of time wondering what's happening over the wall. Nesta comes over to tell Feyre she's going to have a hard time fitting in with the guests at the party unless she wears gloves because her hands are too callous from the manual labour. Fuck off. Feyre says maybe she doesn't want to fit in with their social circles, and Nesta asks why is she bothering to stay then. Feyre says it's my home, isn't it? But Nesta says no. She thinks her home is somewhere very far away. She confesses that the glamour had never actually worked on her, and she can remember everything. She watched Elaine and their father forget everything that had happened right before her eyes, but she could still see the beast's claw marks on the table in the cottage, so she knew she was right. She tells Feyre she had actually tried to come after her. She'd hired the mercenary, this girlie who they sold the wolf pelt to help her, and together they had travelled 2 days to the wall, but couldn't find a way into Prithian. So in the end, she was forced to travel 2 days home with no more answers. That's all we hear of the mercenary, by the way, unless she comes back in the later books. Really weird. I just thought she was going to come up more. Feyre literally cannot believe Nesta would do that for her. She knew her father wouldn't bother, but she'd completely underestimated her oldest sister. Nesta also says that's why she decided not to marry Thomas Mandry. She knew he would never have gone with her. And actually, yeah, new relationship test. Would he help rescue your sister from fairyland after she got kidnapped by a big beast? Think about it. Feyre's opinion of Nesta has completely changed now. She might be a bitch, but she's clearly very loyal and was prepared to run headfirst into completely unknown danger, despite having never even set foot in the forest before, to save her sister. Big respect to her. Feyre tells her that Thomas never deserved her anyway, and she's so right. Nesta asks Feyre to tell her everything, so she does in great detail from beginning to end. They watch Elaine and their father flit about, sorting stuff out for the ball. Nesta says there are days when she wants to ask him if he remembers the years he almost let them all starve to death. She admits that she hates him for never stepping up. Even before they were poor, he let their mother die without even trying to find a cure. He took stupid risks. She really blames him for everything that happened to them. She says it sounds like Feyre would have gone to the ends of the earth to save her High Lord. Feyre says she would. Throughout the ball, Feyre stays very close to Nesta because her resting bitch face is great for scaring off any suitors, and there are lots of them. Everyone seems very interested in Feyre's newfound fortune, but she hasn't forgotten the fact that they knew all these people before and no one thought to check in with them when they lost all their money. Elaine is absolutely loving it all though, so Feyre tries not to look completely disgusted for her sake. She can't get what Nesta had said about Tamlin out of her head. How had she let him send her away when he's in danger? Why didn't she try harder to piece the puzzle together and work out what's going on with the Blight, or who Amarantha is? Why didn't she fight for him or tell him she loves him? Where had the part of her gone who would fight for every meal? When she looks back at it, even Lucian had seemed disappointed in her for not fighting to stay. The ball goes on until the early hours of the morning. The following afternoon, the family all come together for lunch. The food is fine, but nothing compared to what Feyre used to eat in the spring court. She thanks them for all their hard work on the ball, and her father asks if any of his friends' sons had piqued her interest, but she manages to dodge the question. He says he's considering buying the Bedder land. It will go up for sale soon because none of them had survived the fire. He must be talking about the same house she heard Thomas talking about in the village. He thinks it'll be a good investment property and maybe one of the girls could build a house on it one day. Feyre's heart sinks. She asks, what happened to the Bedders? He says their house had burned down the day before Feyre came home and everyone had died, even the servants. It was so bad, they haven't even been able to find Claire's body. Oh my god, Claire Bedder. That's the name she'd given Rhysand. That can't be a coincidence, but that would mean she's caused the death of that whole family. But Claire's body is missing. Maybe she's still alive and in Prithian. Maybe she's been kidnapped in Feyre's place. Feyre turns to Nesta and says, you must listen very carefully. Everything I've told you must remain a secret. You do not come looking for me. You do not speak my name to anyone ever again. I think something very bad might be happening in Prithian. Her father asks what on earth she's talking about, because she's literally just like speaking all of it, despite the fact that it's meant to be a massive secret. She's just like saying it all in front of everyone. Nesta shushes him while Feyre carries on speaking. If you won't leave here, at least hire guards to watch the wall, the house, the forest, the village. At the very first sign of danger, you need to get on a ship and you need to go. Sail as far south as you can. Just get away from here. Nesta helps Feyre change her clothes into something a little more practical. Ba-da-da-da. She's back in her tunic from the spring court. She tells her she should never look back or worry about them. They don't need her. Feyre's not offended. She knows Nesta is trying to give her the gift of being able to live her life guilt-free. She grabs some hunting knives and a bow and arrows. Nesta asks what she even plans to do. She's just a human after all, and she has no idea what she's running into. Feyre says she has no idea, but she has to try. Nesta asks her to try and get a message to them when she knows things are safe. Elaine gets a horse and a load of food ready for Feyre to take with her. She cries when she says goodbye and tells her she'd still like to explore Europe with her someday. She remembers everything now. Nice one, Feyre. Her father is nowhere to be seen. She says some quick but emotional goodbyes and then rides north for 2 days towards the wall. Eventually, she reaches a point where her horse won't ride any further. She dismounts and finds there is an invisible wall that she can't cross. This must be it, but she needs to find a way in. She knows there are holes, she's heard the fairies talking about it, so she keeps walking along the wall, feeling for holes until she finds one. She gets back on the horse and rides between 2 swirly stones on the floor straight into Prithian. She can smell the metallic scent of magic, so she knows she's made it. And we also know she's made it because we are quite clearly now in the enchanted forest rather than the boring normal one. You're welcome. Feyre rides north in silence with an arrow at the ready, just in case. Her plan is she's going to tell Tamlin that she loves him and will fight by his side whatever it takes. Sounds fairly straightforward. It's a pretty long journey back to Prithian, so while Feyre's travelling, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the money I saved just last week by using Sprive to make overpayments on my mortgage. Last week, I spent £98.45 on a weekly shop, which earned me £2.46 in cashback. But because I no longer have to pay interest on that money once I've made that overpayment, it actually saved me £8.02 over the lifetime of my mortgage. Then I went to Costa and I bought a £30 gift card to last me the month. That saved me £5.91 on my mortgage. I spent £80 on a theatre ticket, which saved me over £15 on my mortgage. And I also went to Nando's with my friends, which saved me £5.23. It sounds small, but it all really adds up. If you have a mortgage and you're not using Sprive, you're basically throwing money away. Pretty much everywhere I shop is on the app, so it's really easy to accumulate over time. Use my code AmyA5 to get £5 towards an overpayment on your mortgage when you sign up for Sprive, and if you have a joint mortgage, you could both sign up with that code to get double the reward. I reckon Feyre's probably made it back to the spring court by now, don't you? She reaches the manor and immediately knows something is wrong. The gates are all bent out of shape and the hedges need trimming, God forbid. The front doors are wide open and one is hanging off its hinges. The place is completely empty. She stands in the front hall and shouts for Tamlin and Lucian, but nobody comes. The chandeliers are laying shattered on the ground, the windows have been blown out and the banisters are in splinters. There's blood smeared all over the walls and the stairs and in puddles on the floor. Something very bad has clearly happened here. No shit, Sherlock. However, there are no bodies, so they could still be alive. She hears something moving, so dives behind a broken door. Staring through a small gap in the hinges, she sees a caped figure limping in. It's Alice. Oh, thank God for that. Feyre pushes the door to one side and Alice screams. She calms down a little bit when she sees it's Feyre, but tells her she can't stay here, it's not safe. Feyre asks if Tamlin is alive, and Alice says yes, and so is Lucian. Oh yeah, and him as well. She asks Alice to tell her everything, but Alice is really skittish. She motions for Feyre to follow her and leads her down to the kitchen, which has been burnt almost to a crisp. Alice is about to drop some serious lore, so listen up. She's going to tell us all about Amarantha. Amarantha is originally from Highburn, that foreign land the surial mentioned. Centuries ago, when the Fae ruled over the humans, she worked her way up to be the King of Highburn's favourite commander. She was really good friends with Tamlin's dad, who was at that point the High Lord of the Spring Court. Because of that, he would sometimes visit Highburn and would bring Tamlin, who was a young man at the time, along with him. Amarantha took quite a liking to Tamlin and tried it on with him, but he always turned her down. When the war happened, she and her sister Clythia were brutal, to say the least. They fought alongside one another and they were an absolute force to be reckoned with, slaughtering humans and any fairies who got in their way left, right and centre, until Clythia fell in love with a mortal. But not just any mortal, she fell in love with a commander of the human army. His name was Durian, and she was down bad for him, so much so that she was a little bit blinded by love, and she didn't realise that he was actually just using her to collect information about Amarantha's forces. Once he had what he needed, he tortured her and killed her slowly and painfully, and then he made sure to leave pieces of her for Amarantha to find. After that, Amarantha hated humans with a burning, fiery rage. And kind of fair enough, maybe. She fought Durian, defeated his army, and tortured him for weeks. In fact, she was so busy torturing him that when the King of Hybern called on her to help him with his war efforts, she couldn't tear herself away, and that decision is ultimately what led to them losing the war. After Durian was killed, she kept his finger bone on a necklace and one of his eyes on a ring, as you can see. The little googly eye ring right there. I had too much fun with that. After the treaty was signed, rather than freeing her human slaves, she killed them. She really made hating humans her main personality trait from there on out. Amarantha went back to Hybern, and for a while it was quite quiet actually. But, like the surial mentioned to Feyre, the King of Hybern was angry. He felt like he'd been forced to sign the treaty and he grew to really regret it. He wanted his human slaves back. So 100 years ago, he sent some of his most trusted people over to Prithian as emissaries. I don't know why Amarantha was one of his most trusted people when she literally lost them the war in the first place, but go off, I guess. The High Lords were kind of sceptical of her at first because obviously she'd been quite bloodthirsty before. She'd had quite the reputation, but she managed to convince them that the death of her sister had really changed her outlook on life and they should absolutely trust her now. So they did. Great idea. She was very charming and she completely won them over. She made trade deals between Prithian and Hybern, and overall she really improved the relationship between the kingdoms. Slay from her. The king's plan from here was to use those good relationships to get the High Lords on side and then invade the humans. But what he didn't realise was that Amarantha had grown to actually quite like Prithian. So much so, she wanted it for herself. One of the ships full of goods from Hybern was actually smuggling Amarantha's army, a Trojan horse situation. Her plan was to build up her powers and her army to a level where she would be able to invade the humans with her own Prithian army. But she knew she'd never be able to take on all of the High Lords at once, so instead of going at them with force, she would need to outsmart them. So, 49 years ago, she threw a ball and invited all of the High Lords. They trusted her, remember? But she poisoned their wine and then stole their powers and left them with only a very weak version of their original magic. With the High Lords weakened, she enslaved everyone living in Prithian. She is the blight. There is no sickness. It's just Amarantha trying to gather enough power to take the humans' land too. She set up her court in a place called Under the Mountain. Very original name there. You'll never guess where it is. And declared herself as High Queen of Prithian. If you remember, she had a big fat crush on Tamlin from before, but things were a bit awkward between them because he thinks she's a horrible person, so he rejected her. But it was important they keep the peace, so he sent Lucien to her to sort of make friends on behalf of the Spring Court. But she was so offended by it, I'm not really sure what she's offended by, but she tells him to go back to the shithole he crawled out of and then carved out his eye with her fingernail and left a big gash down the side of his face, which is how he got that scar and the golden eye. I was sort of imagining like a big fight or something, but it sounds like there was quite a clear winner here. After that, she hosted a masquerade ball for the Spring Court to make amends for what she did to Lucien. We can all see where this is going. She said it was a masquerade so Lucien could cover the scar and have a fun time, and she insisted that absolutely everybody in the Spring Court, including the servants, had to be there. Talon agreed because he's a mug. Because he was hoping for a peaceful outcome. Once everyone was assembled, mask on, ready for a good time, she announced that she would grant peace to the Spring Court if Tamlin joined her under the mountain as her lover and consort. He was absolutely disgusted by the idea, especially after what she did to his friend, and said he'd rather sleep with a human than ever lay a finger on her. Amarantha loves a game, so she wasn't going to take that lying down. She told Tamlin she would give him one chance to break the spell and get his power back. She challenged him to find a human girl and convince her to marry him. She said if he could do that within 49 years, he would win. But otherwise, she would claim him. But this is Amarantha we're talking about, so that wasn't all. She's tricky. There's some wildly specific criteria he needs to follow. The human he marries has to hate fairies so much she's killed one. It has to be one of Tamlin's own men that's sacrificed, and it has to be a result of Tamlin's direct orders, and it has to be a completely unprovoked attack. The fairy can't, provoke the human into killing him. It has to be out of hatred, just like Durian's attack was on her sister. Hang on a minute. Does that mean all that stuff Tamlin had said about humans killing fairies was total bollocks? Alice confirms, yes. He made that all up so he could bring Feyre back to Prithian in the hopes he might be able to convince her to marry him. And it had so nearly worked. When Feyre looked back at when she killed that wolf, she realises he had never moved towards her to attack her. He'd just stared at her, waiting. Alice explains to Feyre that if the human girl told Tamlin she loved him and really meant it, the curse would be broken. Hang on, so do they have to be married or not? Instructions unclear. The reason they all have to wear the masks is because Amarantha says humans are vain and would be less likely to trust them that way, so she magically stuck them to their faces. She also stopped them from being able to tell humans anything about the curse, which is why they made up the blight, so they could sort of talk about it without really talking about it. At first, Tamlin had sent men disguised as wolves over the wall every day. They either came back with stories of girls screaming and running away, or he could tell through his bond with them that they'd been killed by human hunters or older women. Hang on, is there an age limit to this? Isn't Tamlin 500 years old? How old is an older woman? Anyway, he sent them out daily for 2 years, and slowly their numbers fell as more of them got killed. Eventually, he gave up on it and stopped sending them out and instead focused his energy on defending his borders from Amarantha. Then she captured all of the other High Lords and forced them to live under the mountain with her. She lets some of them come and go, but others are stuck down there, depending on how much she likes them and what her relationship is like with them. She must like Rhysand then. The only one left out and about was Tamlin, and that was only because she was waiting until the curse had run out. Alice tells Feyre that her sister and her partner, as in her sister's partner, had been killed when Amarantha first invaded the summer court where she used to live. Alice took her nephews and ran just before everyone was dragged under the mountain. She made it to the spring court and begged Tamlin to help hide her boys, which he did, so she offered to work in the manor as a thank you, just days before the masks got stuck. This winter, with only a few months to go before the curse would expire, Tamlin was encouraged by everyone in the court to give it one last go at freedom for them all. Feyre shot the wolf down, and the rest is history. And if only Feyre had just told Tamlin she loved him, they could all be free now. But no, instead, the whole of the spring court have also been captured and taken under the mountain. Except for Alice, for some reason. But I think that reason is just because we needed someone to spill the beans. This is all so much worse than Feyre thought. Amarantha hates humans so much, her family are in more danger than she ever could have imagined. And God knows what's happening to Tamlin right now. She's sick at the thought of all the sacrifices that have been made for her freedom, which she didn't even really want. She knows Tamlin had actually fallen in love with her, and that by letting her go, he'd put her safety above not only his own life, but also over his entire court. She has to find him and help him get his power back somehow, so he can destroy Amarantha, and then everyone will be free and the humans will be safe and they can live happily ever after. Duh! She asks Alice if Tamlin would win against Amarantha if he had his power back, and she says he's a High Lord, so yeah, probably. But there's no point even thinking about that now because he's her slave down there and he can't act out. They've all still got masks on because she won't remove them until he agrees to be her lover, but even then he won't get his power back and she'll never let them leave from under the mountain. Feyre orders Alice to show her how to get under the mountain. Alice pushes back, saying it's basically a suicide mission. No human who goes under there has ever come out. Plus, Feyre was too blind to even see Tamlin's curse, so she obviously doesn't have great observational skills. Okay, there's no need to be catty at a time like this. Feyre insists saying if she dies, at least it'll be doing something for Tamlin, so he would know she did really love him. And she has to try and save the people she's doomed. Alice says, fine, okay, I'll take you under the mountain. She walks her to the entrance of the cave and gives her a few pointers to remember. Number 1, don't drink the wine. Number 2, don't make deals with anyone unless your life depends on it, but even then, it's probably not worth it. And number 3, don't trust anyone. Not Tamlin, not even your own senses. And lastly, there is one more part of the curse that they still can't tell her, but she needs to keep her ears open and think about everything she's heard. Feyre is terrified, but determined. She tells Alice that if she and her nephews need somewhere to flee to, they should go to her family's house and ask for Nesta. She knows everything and will help them in any way she can. Alice wishes her luck and she steps into the cave. Feyre walks through the pitch black, freezing cold corridor for what feels like forever until she sees a tiny crack of light in the distance. She walks around blind corners praying that she doesn't bump into any fairies because she doesn't want to have to kill them, which is a bit cocky in my opinion. She tries to remind herself it's no different to hunting. She remembers that blue fairy from the summer court whose wings got torn off, and that helps her remember how dangerous the creatures down here could be. She needs to be ruthless. After potentially hours of walking, she finds herself in a dimly lit corridor with torches on the wall. Great that she can actually see where she's going and everything, but it also means she has nowhere to hide. Suddenly, long, bony fingers wrap around her arm, and she turns to see a terrifying face with a mouth full of fangs. It's the ACOTAR from the garden. It hisses at her, asks what she's doing down here, and then drags her along the corridor towards an enormous stone door and then into a huge chamber with high ceilings held up by pillars of stone. There are hundreds of fairies in here, dancing and chatting. It seems to be some sort of party. Some of them are wearing masks and some aren't, so it must be a mix of high fae from all different courts. She's thrown to the stone floor at the foot of a throne, and as she looks up, she lays eyes on Amarantha for the first time. Feyre thinks she's not as devastatingly beautiful as I had imagined. I think she just called her clapped. The book says, from her slender, creamy neck hung a long, thin chain, and from it dangled a single age-worn bone the size of a finger. So that's obviously Jurian's finger, but I just really object to the word creamy being used as an adjective. On another throne next to her is Tamlin. He doesn't react at all. His face looks like it's made of stone. The ACOTAR tells her he found this human thing downstairs, and Amarantha asks what she's doing down here. Feyre, very boldly, says, I came to claim the one I love. I've come to claim Tamlin, the High Lord of the Spring Court. Everyone in the room gasps, but Amarantha laughs. She puts the pieces together very quickly that she had been torturing the wrong girl. She congratulates Tamlin on actually making a human worm love him. He looks away, but that is the only reaction she gets from him. He is giving poker face to the extreme. Feyre demands Amarantha to let him go, and she asks Feyre to give her one reason why she shouldn't destroy her on the spot. Feyre says that Amarantha tricked Tamlin. It's not fair, but she just finds the whole thing funny, and she points to the back wall, saying that's what Feyre should have been. Feyre's head spins around to see the mangled corpse of Claire Bedder hanging from the wall. She has burned skin, bent fingers, and red lines crisscrossed across her naked body. I didn't make a puppet for that. I thought I'd spare us all. You're welcome. Amarantha says she took great pleasure in torturing her and that her screams were like music to her ears. She actually thanks Feyre for giving the wrong name because it was such a pleasure killing her, and now she gets to do it all over again. But Feyre cannot look away from Claire's body. She did this to her. The body on the wall should be hers. She looks over at Tamlin. He let that happen to Claire. He didn't say anything to step in and stop it. Amarantha can see the cogs whirring in Feyre's head and asks if she still wants to claim someone who would do that to an innocent girl. Feyre can't let Claire's death be in vain, so she says yes. Amarantha asks Tamlin what he has to say about all this. He says with a completely blank expression, I've never seen her before. Someone must have glamoured her as a joke, probably recent. Okay, so he's still trying to protect her. Amarantha realises this means he loves her back, and she is shrieking with laughter. She's having the time of her life. She says killing Feyre outright would be too dull, so she's going to have some fun with her. Feyre's bowels turned watery. Not again, Feyre, we can't take you anywhere. Amarantha says she'll make a bargain with Feyre. If Feyre can complete 3 challenges of Amarantha's choosing, she can have Tamlin. She speaks to her ring, like the eye, like a maniac, and says, "See, Jurian, that would be proof that humans really can love true." Feyre says she'll consider it on the condition that if she wins, Tamlin's curse is broken and the fairies from the Spring Court are all free to leave and will remain free forever. She remembers that Amarantha's sneaky and she doesn't want to leave any loopholes open. Amarantha says, "Okay, fine, but in that case, I'll throw in another element just to see if you're actually smart enough to deserve a High Lord. You can either complete all the challenges, or, if you can't stand it anymore, you can solve a riddle instead. If you solve the riddle, the curse will be broken instantly. You can answer at any time, but if you answer incorrectly..." She points up at Claire. It's quite clear what she means. Amarantha says Feyre will face 1 challenge every month at the full moon, and in the meantime, she'll stay in a cell unless there's some work she needs to do to earn her keep. She's waiting for Feyre to agree to her terms. Feyre glances over at Tamlin. His eyes are wide, screaming at her not to agree, but she doesn't really feel like there's any other option. Her love for Tamlin and the knowledge that he still loves her gives her the courage she needs to say yes. Amarantha snaps her fingers and the distinct smell of magic tells Feyre there's no turning back now. Amarantha orders the Atter to give Feyre a worthy welcome, and so he swoops down and punches her in the face repeatedly. Her bones crunch and her legs collapse beneath her. Her mouth fills with blood and she passes out. She wakes up in excruciating pain, barely able to open her eyes because they're so swollen. She can just about work out that she's in a prison cell with no furniture or anything, just some hay on the floor. It's dark, apart from a tiny bit of dim light coming from some torches down the corridor. First, she feels for her weapons, but obviously they've been confiscated. Then she feels her face to assess the damage and concludes it is very damaged. Her nose is broken, her jaw is broken, her lip is split, even breathing hurts her lungs. She has some first aid skills, so she tries to think of something she can do to help herself, but without access to water, there's very little that can be done. The pain is so bad, she falls unconscious again. She wakes up to the sound of her cell door creaking open, and a familiar voice says her name. It's Lucien. He asks her if she's lost her mind and why she came here, so Feyre tells him everything while fighting back tears. Lucien is actually quite angry with her because if she dies anyway, that will make their sacrifice completely pointless. Feyre asks him what he wants her to do about that now. I like the dynamic between these two, they don't put up with each other's shit. He gets a good look at her nose and he says he'll have to reset it before he can heal it with magic. Feyre hears the crunch and feels pain so strong it makes her pass out again. When she comes back around, she can actually breathe without pain and her eyes open properly. Lucien tells her he left some bruises and a bit of a black eye, so it won't be obvious someone's been in to help her. Feyre asks about Tamlin, but before he can answer, he hears someone coming and bolts out of the cell. Moments later, a guard peeks through the peephole in the cell door and glares at her. They feed her stale bread and water periodically, just enough to keep her alive, but the days all merge together down there and she loses track of time altogether, until one day she's dragged, half asleep, to the throne room where Amarantha is waiting, along with a huge crowd of Fae. She tells Feyre she looks positively dreadful and she seems absolutely thrilled about it. Amarantha has realised she doesn't actually know Feyre's name. It's not fair that she knows Amarantha's name and not the other way around, and she's already learned the consequences of giving a false name. Feyre stays quiet, not really wanting to give anything about herself away in case Amarantha somehow uses it to her advantage. Then Amarantha summons Rhysand, who steps out of the crowd and stands beside Feyre. "Is this the girl you saw at Tamlin's estate?" she asks. And Rhysand replies, "I suppose," and shrugs his shoulders. He seems completely uninterested. He says all humans look the same to him, but Feyre knows that's bollocks because he'd recognised her that day at the manor. Amarantha says if Feyre won't give her her name, she'll have to do things the fun way. She snaps her fingers and the Atter flies up into the air, swoops down, grabs Lucien out of the crowd, and then drops him on the floor in front of Amarantha. She orders Rhysand to hold Lucien's mind, and Lucien's body goes completely still and rigid. Feyre can remember the agony he must be feeling from when Rhysand had done the same to her. 4 red-haired, high fae men make their way to the front of the crowd, all staring at Lucien with huge grins on their faces. They must be his brothers. What twats. Amarantha asks Lucien to tell her the girl's name, but he looks at Tamlin's blank expression and squares his shoulders, keeping his mouth firmly shut. So she asks his grinning brothers if any of them know Feyre's name, and they tell her they don't, but if they did, they would be absolutely thrilled to give it to her. Rhysand's eyes narrow on Lucien and he twitches and groans. He's obviously in a lot of pain. Feyre can't stand it anymore, so she blurts her own name out. Immediately, Rhysand steps back and Lucien flops onto the floor, trembling. Amarantha seems satisfied now that she knows Feyre's name, and she says it's time to give Feyre the riddle she promised. A reminder, if she answers this correctly, at any time, the challenges will stop, and Feyre, Tamlin, and all of the Spring Court are free to go immediately. Okay, here it is. There are those who seek me a lifetime, but we never meet. And those I kiss, but who trample me beneath ungrateful feet. At times I seem to favour the clever and fair, but I bless all those who are brave enough to dare. By large my ministrations are soft-handed and sweet, but scorned I become a difficult beast to defeat. For though each of my strikes lands a powerful blow, when I kill, I do it slow. Feyre racks her brains trying to make sense of what she's just heard. I'd have forgotten it already. Can she not at least write it down or something? Oh my god, no, she can't read. That's never going to happen, is it? Feyre wonders if it could be some sort of disease or a person even. She can't think of a single thing that might work. People are laughing at her, most notably Lucien's twat brothers, and Amarantha is grinning from ear to ear. She tells Feyre there's no need to work it out right now, but when the answer comes to her, she'll be waiting. And then Feyre is dragged back down into the dungeon. She's trying to work out how much time is passing based on the meal times. She thinks a couple of days pass. The whole time she's thinking about Amarantha's riddle and hoping Lucien will show up again, but he never does. And neither does the answer to the riddle. She's beginning to lose hope, and the more she thinks about it, the less sense it makes. Is it a poison, a venomous animal? She doesn't know, but she wishes she knew what trials awaited her. She feels completely unprepared when at last the guard comes to the cell door and tells her the full moon has arisen. She's taken down a different set of corridors to normal and ends up in a massive arena. The ground is so muddy she can hardly even walk without slipping. There's a huge crowd and the atmosphere is buzzing. They can't wait for whatever it is they're about to see. That doesn't bode well. Amarantha and Tamlin are on a wooden platform which hovers above the mud, and Feyre is dropped right in front of it. Amarantha tells Feyre that her first challenge is beginning, and she hopes she'll enjoy it. Tamlin has a face of stone, as always. The Atter basically acts as crowd control, and he clears a path between Feyre and a 20-foot deep trench full of underground tunnels and uneven ground, and, mud. The Atter's claws sink into Feyre's back as she's picked up and dropped straight down into the trench. The crowd closes in, everyone wanting to get a glimpse of whatever's about to unfold. Feyre can hear them laughing and gossiping and see them passing gold coins between one another. They're betting on her life. Brilliant. Amarantha says, Rhysand told me you're a huntress. Hunt this. The fairies cheer and Amarantha shouts, release it. A huge grate in the side of one of the trenches groans as it opens. A huge grate in the side of one of the trenches opens. And Feyre feels the ground vibrate. Hold on a minute. As a massive worm with a mouthful of teeth so sharp they might as well be knives slithers out towards her. Amarantha laughs and shouts at Feyre to run with the tone of voice you might use when running towards an ice cream van rather than away from something that's going to try and kill you, unless you can get there first. Feyre doesn't have time to think or strategize, she just has to run, but it quickly becomes clear that it's a lot faster than she is. She veers sharply left, trying to get as much distance between them as possible, but they seem very well matched. Feyre is more agile, but the worm is faster. She tries to make as many sharp turns as she can, but it always seems to catch her up. She throws herself through a tight gap in the mud, but she's misjudged it and she gets stuck. She tries to claw her way out, but she's not budging, and she can hear the worm getting closer. She's sobbing by the time she feels the worm's hot breath on her ankles, and she braces herself for a world of pain, but the worm slides straight past her. Feyre manages to get enough grip to pull herself through to the next passageway, which gives her just enough time to look up to the crowd. They're all looking down the passageway she came from, so that must be where the worm is. Feyre finally works out something she can use to her advantage. The worm is blind. She keeps running while she's thinking things through, but doesn't look where she's going, and she falls several feet straight into a pit, landing in thick, wet mud. She claws at the walls around her, trying to get enough grip to climb back up, but it's too slippery. Behind her is a pitch black tunnel that she doesn't really like the look of, but she's running out of options. She steps backwards, suddenly very aware of a sharp pain in her tailbone from the fall. She reaches a hand out to stable herself and jumps out of her skin when it lands on something smooth and hard. Bone. She notices a smooth dome underneath her feet. Yeah, that'll be a skull. She's got to get out of here. Amarantha calls down to Feyre, telling her to come out of the tunnel. It's no fun if they can't see where she is. Feyre's eyes adjust to the darkness and she can see countless bones sticking out of the mud. This must be the worm's lair, and that also means it's been eating people. She runs back out to where she'd landed and tries again to climb up the wall, but it's not happening. The fairies up top don't seem particularly excited, so clearly she's not in any immediate danger. Feyre has a thought. Well, she has two thoughts. The first one is that this whole maze is made up of packed mud, and she thinks it's actually all made up of worm poo. But the other thought is a bit more useful. She grabs the largest bones she can find and jams them into the muddy walls, creating a makeshift staircase. Then she breaks a bone in half and sticks it into the ground in the middle of the pit opening, with the sharp ends pointing upwards. She repeats this until the whole floor is an absolute death trap, except for one spot just big enough for her to stand. She only has one chance to get this right, so she's feeling the pressure. She grabs a couple more bones and sticks them into her belt and then rolls around in the mud to cover her scent. Actually, sorry, that's not mud, it's worm poo. She climbs up her makeshift staircase with ease and then runs towards the worm, feeling kind of relaxed because she knows it can't see or smell her. She can hear Rhysand's voice up top explaining to another fairy that by smearing herself in poo, she's just effectively become invisible. As she makes her way over to the worm, she sticks bones into the walls at the tight corners so she can use them for leverage to give herself an edge. God, that is smart actually. If this was me, I'd be so dead already. She gets herself into position, watching where the fairies are looking so she knows where the worm is. She takes a deep breath and mentally prepares herself and then cuts her own arm open with a broken bone and waits for the smell of blood to reach her opponent. The crowd falls silent. She hears Lucian's voice shouting, "To your left!" and bolts just before the wall explodes right where she'd just been stood. The worm is hungry and the scent of Feyre's blood has sent it into an absolute frenzy. 30-year-old woman, by the way. What am I doing? It's a Saturday night. It's 11:30 p.m. Her plan works perfectly, and grabbing onto the bones, she can spin around the corners with ease, which evens out the race as she absolutely flies back to her trap and jumps straight into the pit, landing in the one tiny gap she left herself with the precision of a skilled huntress. Go on, girl. She catches her arm on one of the spikes and feels a searing pain, but she doesn't have time to deal with that right now. She dives into the cave just as the worm hits the earth with a wet, crunching noise. Ugh. And then it falls completely still. It's basically been like speared on all of the bones. She's only gone and done it. The crowd gasps and cheers as Feyre emerges from the pit, still holding one of the broken bones like a sword. A wave of relief washes over her. She's actually won, and Amarantha looks fuming. She throws the bone into the mud near Amarantha's feet, splashing brown liquid all over her dress. "I suppose you'll be happy to learn most of my court lost a great deal of money tonight. Almost all of them bet on you lasting less than a minute. Only one person said you would actually win." She doesn't have a chance to look for Tamlin or Lucian before she's dragged back to her cell. Her arm is in a really bad way. The bone is literally sticking out and she's in so much pain, but no one comes to fix it in the days following the trial. She's actually really starting to panic because it's been days now and it just won't stop bleeding. She's no doctor, but she knows what that means. She's looking out for signs of infection and it's not looking good. She's got a raging fever, she's throwing up what little food she's managed to eat, and her vision is blurry, but she's trying to convince herself maybe it's just a cold. I don't think mind over matter is going to help you here, Queen, but Whatever makes you feel better, I guess. She thinks she's seeing things when the shape of a man forms out of the shadows in her cell, as if appearing from thin air. The shadow smiles as it takes full form. It's recent. Okay, new power unlocked. What a sorry state for Tamlin's champion, he taunts, as if he's just come here to mock her. She basically tells him to fuck off, and rightly so, but she's too weak to say it with any oomph. He drops down, crouching next to her, and holds her clammy face in his hands, still mocking her. He asks, what would Tamlin say if he knew his beloved was rotting away down here? She once again tells him to go away. He tells her she's made him a lot of money, so he's here to return the favour. So he must have been that one person who betted on her winning. He grabs her arm and pulls it into the light to get a better look. She tries not to scream. She doesn't want him to know how bad it is in case Amarantha uses it against her. The book says he examines the wound with a smile appearing on his sensuous lips. Please, Feyre, you're barely even conscious. Now is not the time for checking people out. She orders him again to get out, but he doesn't listen. He says he'll make a trade with her. He'll heal her arm and the infection situation, but in exchange, once all of these trials are over, Feyre will live with him in the Night Court for 2 weeks out of every month. Feyre immediately says no, and Rhysand seems shocked, even though, let's be honest, it doesn't exactly sound like the offer of the century. He says if she's waiting for Lucien to come down and heal her again, it's not going to happen. After his outburst during the trial, Amarantha made Tamlin give him 20 lashes with a whip. Tamlin even broke his no emotion rule to beg for Lucien to be spared. The thought of the whole situation makes Feyre feel sick. She tells Rhysand to go to hell. He grabs the shard of bone sticking out of her arm and twists it. She screams out in pain and he twists it again. He smirks. She spits in his face. He tells her this is a one-time offer. If she doesn't take him up on it now, she won't get the chance again. She spits in his face again. She does not know how to help herself, does she? He starts to disappear back into the shadows where he came from. Feyre has to accept that as it stands, she is going to die of this infection. The whole of the Spring Court's fate is riding on her. It would be selfish of her not to accept Rhysand's offer just out of pride. For Tamlin's sake, she would sell her soul. She calls out to him to wait, and he materialises again. He's back in the room. Just 2 weeks? She asks. Just 2 weeks. 2 teensy tiny weeks with me every month is all I ask, he replies. Sorry, 2 weeks out of every month is literally half the month? What is this, a shared custody agreement? She asks why he even wants that, and he replies, if I told you, there would be no fun in it, would there? Looking at her arm, which is absolutely ruined, Feyre knows she doesn't really have a choice. But she's never one to go down without a fight, so she makes him a counter offer. 5 days. He says 10. She offers 7, and after a long pause, he concedes. If they ever make it out of here, for 1 week out of every month, Feyre will live with him in the Night Court. She says it's a deal, and the smell of metal immediately hits her nose as the agreement is bound by magic. When she wakes up, oh yeah, she passed out again, but at this stage what's new? She's constantly passing out. She needs to get her blood sugar checked or something. When she wakes up, the fever is gone, and she can actually think clearly again. Rhysand is still standing above her, so she can't have been out for long. She lifts her arm to get a good look at it, and she's shocked to see that it is healed, yes, but it's also covered in swirls of ink, like tattoos, with an eye inked onto the palm of her hand. Rhysand says that in his court, it's standard procedure to mark their bargains permanently on flesh. She's fuming and spits at Rhysand. For someone who doesn't drink, doesn't have access to any water, she's spitting a lot. You didn't tell me this would happen, she says. He replies, you didn't ask, so how am I to blame? Unless this lack of gratitude and appreciation is because you fear a certain High Lord's reaction. Oh my god, he's right, Tamlin's going to be absolutely fuming. Rhysand says he'll wait to tell Tamlin until the moment is right. He's clearly really enjoying this. Maybe hurting Tamlin was his real motivation this whole time. He tells her to rest up and then disappears into the shadows. Gone for good this time. In the month leading up to the next trial, Feyre is asked to complete a couple of chores to earn her keep. One day, she is given a brush and a bucket, shoved into a white marble hall and told to make it clean by supper, or they'll put her on a spit and spin her over the fire. Charming. But that sounds easy enough, right? Wrong. The water is filthy, and the more Feyre scrubs, the dirtier the floors get. She's basically painting it brown. She scrubs and scrubs until her hands throb, but it just gets worse and worse. The door opens and a woman with red hair steps quietly into the hall. She looks just like Lucien. See? The resemblance is striking. It must be his mum. She points at the bucket and says, "For giving your name in place of my son's life, my debt is paid." And then she hurries away. The water is clean. Okay, so we know Lucien's brothers and dad are horrible people, but maybe his mum's all right. I'm not sure how Feyre manages to clean up that whole mess with a single bucket of water, but let's not overthink it too much. When the guard comes back, he is gobsmacked that she's somehow managed to fulfill his impossible request. So the next day, he tries again. This time, he throws her into a massive bedroom lit by just a few candles, so it's quite dark in there, and tells her to pick the lentils out of the fireplace before the occupant returns. Sounds very ominous. Or he will peel off her skin. Isn't the lentils out of the fire thing from Cinderella originally? Feyre thinks it shouldn't be too hard, but she's wrong. After 2 hours, her eyes are burning. She's covered in ash, and every time she thinks she might have done it, she blinks and then sees even more lentils. The door clicks open, and Feyre jumps out of her skin and grabs a poker and hides it behind her back to use in self-defense. As wonderful as it is to see you, Feyre darling, do I want to know why you're digging through my fireplace? Rhysand asks. Oh, so he's the occupant. Feyre explains, but he doesn't seem to have any idea what she's on about. Feyre says, "Well, Amarantha didn't seem too happy that you bet in my favour for the first task. Maybe she's testing your loyalty." Rhysand replies, "I lied to Amarantha about not knowing what Claire Bedder looked like, and it's not the first time I've lied to her either." Alright, legend. She plays her games and I play mine. It gets boring down here otherwise. Anyway, are you going to put the poker down or start swinging? Feyre changes the subject. She asks how Rhysand still has his powers when the other High Lords don't. He says they're a much weaker version, just like Tamlin was left with his strength and his shapeshifting. She asks if they can all shapeshift, and he says they all have a beast. Then he flashes her his massive wings. Feyre thinks he's, and I quote, "horrific, stunning, the face of 1,000 nightmares and dreams." That sounds like me looking at a tub of Ben & Jerry's fish food ice cream, knowing my stomach's going to hate me later. Rhysand snaps his fingers and his wings retract. Yes, that's right. They are Velcro. Suddenly, the bucket of lentils is full and Feyre's as clean as if she'd just had a nice long bath, which is good probably because I don't think she's had any way of washing herself in months now, thinking about it. When the guard comes back to the door to collect Feyre, Rhysand tells him she completed the task. He speaks to him seductively, apparently, and tells him not to give Feyre any more tasks or chores and to tell the others the same. Also, they can't hurt her, and if they do, they have to take their own daggers and gut themselves. Okay, sounds quite extreme. As Feyre leaves, he shouts, "You're welcome." She rolls her eyes, but it seems to have done something. After that, a fresh, hot meal arrives at her cell every morning and evening. Feyre spends her days in her cell trying to drown out periodic screams from elsewhere in the dungeon. Sounds like she's not the only person Amarantha's playing games with. She recites the riddle over and over in her head, but she just can't make any sense of it. She inspects the swirly tattoo that now covers her entire arm and stares at the eye on her palm. One night, as she's drifting off to sleep, she swears she sees it blink, but she's probably imagining things. One day, 2 shadows in the shape of women appear in Feyre's cell. Now, if I want you all to just imagine for a second that you've been given the description of shadows in the shape of women and then a load of felt and googly eyes. I'm telling you now that is near on impossible. So I did try to make puppets for them, but it is really, I must reiterate, it's so hard to make shadows out of felt. Anyway, this is what we've got. It's sort of a net situation, but I feel like it sort of looks like a Pac-Man ghost, and also I didn't have enough of this net stuff, so let's just pretend there are 2 of them. These are the shadow servants. Ooh. They grab Feyre by the arms gently and pull her straight through the closed cell door as if she is made of shadow too. The guards don't even look up. They lead her down a set of unfamiliar corridors until they reach a room where they strip her, bathe her, and then paint her body from neck to toe with swirls that match her new tattoo. They dress her in a see-through, gauzy white dress, if you can even call it that. It doesn't leave very much to the imagination. And if you're thinking, surely this strange woman can't have made this into a puppet, you would be incorrect. Here she is. Rhysand appears in the doorway, looking her up and down in an approving way. She tells him the bargain hasn't started yet, and he replies, I know, but I need an escort for the party tonight, and you look just as I'd hoped you would. She asks if all of this is really necessary, and he says, of course, how else would I know if anyone touches you? He runs a finger along her shoulder, smearing the paint, and he says he'll remember where his hands have been, but if anyone else touches her, he'll know. He doesn't like his belongings being tampered with. Sorry, his what? Ew. He leads Feyre into the throne room where a party is in full swing. Fairies turn to look at them as they walk through the crowd. Feyre is terrified and freezing on account of her lack of clothing. Rhysand walks them straight up to Amarantha and Tamlin, seated on their thrones as usual. He gestures to Feyre and explains, we made a bargain. 1 week with me at the Night Court every month in exchange for my healing services after the first task for the rest of her life. Tamlin's face doesn't give anything away, but his hands tense, gripping the arms of his throne. Feyre so desperately wants to tell him that she did it for him, but she knows it would only make things worse for everyone if she caused a scene. Rhysand does seem to think she'll have a life after the trials though, so at least someone believes she'll make it through. He leads her over to a table full of food and offers her wine. Alice's words echo through Feyre's mind and she declines. Oh my god, finally. Never mind the rest of her advice, but at least she remembered this bit. He orders her to drink again, and this time it feels like she has no choice. Her hands move involuntarily and lift the goblet to her lips. She wakes up in her cell, still wearing the dress, and vomits in the corner until there is nothing left in her stomach. A few hours later, Lucien appears at the door. He wraps his cloak around her because she's shivering. I'm cold just looking at her. She asks Lucien what happened because she can't remember anything. There are a few smudges in the paint around her waist, but nowhere else. Lucien tells her that Rhysand made her dance for him and sit in his lap. Tamlin did very well not to react. He asks why on earth she agreed to Rhysand's ridiculous deal when she should have known he would come to help her as fast as he could. She says she was literally on death's door. You can't really argue with that. Feyre tells him she's sorry that he was punished for helping her, and she thanks him. He apologises for not coming sooner. Amarantha had used her magic to slow down his healing, so he was barely able to move until today. The guards are about to change over, so he makes his way out. That evening, the same thing happens again. Her body paint is washed off and refreshed. She's dressed in another skimpy dress and forced to drink wine and entertain. This becomes a nightly occurrence. Every night she catches a quick glimpse of Tamlin while she's still in control of herself, and she tries to convey love and pain in her eyes. Then she drinks the wine, she dances for Rhysand and sits in his lap, and he touches her arms and her waist, but never more. I was going to say that's decent of him, but actually, no, sorry, that is the bare minimum. She spends her days vomiting, sleeping off a hangover, and trying not to feel too embarrassed when the flashbacks hit her from the night before. She tries to think about the riddle every now and again, but she's not exactly in the headspace for puzzles. One night, Rhysand comes to collect her when she's ready, but instead of guiding her out of the door, he steps inside and closes it behind him. He tells her the second trial is tomorrow night, so this could be her last. Aren't you going to beg me to give you one night with your beloved? No, I'm not worried. I'll have that night and all the ones after it when I beat the final task. Okay, self-assured queen. Were you this prickly with Tamlin when you were his captive? He never treated me like a captive or a slave. She hates Rhysand for forcing her into this weird routine. That's only because he was trying to make up for how brutal his family was. Maybe if he'd acted like a real High Lord, it would have stopped his court from falling. Hasn't your court fallen too? Rhysand looks sad. Oh my god, Feyre's actually managed to squeeze the tiniest bit of emotion out of him. She feels sadness too, empathy maybe. What do you want with me beyond taunting Tamlin? Taunting him is my greatest pleasure. And why does any male need a reason to enjoy the presence of a female? You saved my life. And in doing so, I saved Tamlin's. But why? That, Feyre, is the real question, isn't it? Oh, plot twist, I'm locked in. Maybe he actually loves Tamlin. The day of the second trial has arrived. Feyre stands in front of Amarantha. Oh, actually, she's probably not wearing this dress right now. Where is she? Here she is. Feyre stands in front of Amarantha, who asks if she solved the riddle yet, but Feyre doesn't answer. She stares at Tamlin. Oh, fuck it. There's just so many characters. She stares at Tamlin and he stares back. Tamlin really needs a haircut. But neither of them give anything away on their faces. Amarantha shouts, "Begin!" and the stone floor beneath Feyre shudders and lowers into a pit. The walls creep up around her until they're so high she can't see Tamlin anymore. She looks around to assess the situation. 3 of the walls are made of stone, too smooth to climb. The 4th wall is an iron grate which splits the chamber in 2, and on the other side is Lucien, chained to the middle of the floor. Feyre can hear the coins clinking as the spectators place their bets. She can see Lucien's twat brothers have secured themselves a front row seat. Amarantha shouts down to Feyre, her voice full of excitement. The rules of this challenge are quite simple. Engraved into one of the stone walls is a question, and beneath it there are 3 levers. Feyre has 1 chance to pull the correct lever and save herself and Lucien. If she doesn't, they'll both be crushed by a metal grate which has already started lowering itself from the ceiling, getting closer to crushing them both with every passing second. It makes a loud groaning sound which is particularly unnerving. Well, that sounds simple enough, until you remember Feyre can't read. She scans her eyes along the inscription, praying the words will jump out to her. She tries sounding out the words, but it's taking too long. The grate is going to crush them both to death, and Lucien is screaming at her to answer it. All right, I don't see you helping, backseat driver. She's just going to have to guess. She has a 1 in 3 chance of survival. That's not too bad. Although actually, if it was my life, I'd probably think that was pretty bad. She considers which number has the best vibes, 1, 2 or 3. 1, all on its own, is like Amarantha, and 3 is like 3 sisters squeezed into one tiny bed. Oh my god, girl, you don't have time for this, just pick 1. She decides to pull lever number 2 because 2 is like her and Tamlin. Sure, whatever, just pull 1. As she reaches her hand towards the lever, she feels a searing pain in the palm of her hand. The eye tattoo seems to narrow. Is it communicating with her? What a crazy idea. She reaches for the same lever again and the pain returns. Okay, let's try something else. Lever number 1 is painful too, but when she reaches for lever number 3, she feels nothing. She looks up. The grate only inches from her face now, and she can see Rhysand staring down at her, with no expression on his face, but his eyes seem very intense. She pulls the 3rd lever and braces for impact, but the groaning stops. The grate freezes just above her. Feyre has won the 2nd challenge. The floor beneath her rises until she's back on a level ground with the others. She can't believe that not being able to read has actually almost killed her. She falls to her knees, sobbing and struggling to catch her breath. Pain sears through her left arm again, and a voice inside her says, "Don't let her see you cry. Put your hands at your sides and stand up. Don't give her the satisfaction of seeing you break." Involuntarily, she stands bolt upright and looks Amarantha dead in the eyes. Apparently, the High Queen of Prithian's gaze is full of ancient malice. I wonder what my gaze is full of. Desire for sweet treats, probably. Feyre is taken back to her cell, and then she has the big cry of all big cries. She cries for everything she's ever lost, every injury she's ever received, every pain she's ever felt. God, that sounds amazing. She is going to feel great when she's got all that out of her system. I'm kind of jealous. Rhysand appears out of nowhere and says, "Still weeping?" Great that he's so sympathetic and everything. He reminds her that she should be celebrating. She completed the 2nd task, but that makes her cry even harder because she knows that she hadn't really. Without his help, Amarantha would have outsmarted her that time. Doesn't exactly bode well for the 3rd trial. He laughs at her sobbing and then licks a tear off her face. And then another one. I don't know if this is meant to be sexy, but it's weird. He then licks the end of her eyelashes and she jerks her head back. He says, "I figured that would get you to stop crying." I'm sorry, each to their own, but that is a very strange technique. He takes the piss out of Feyre for not being able to read, and she tells him where to go. He says he's been thinking of ways to torment her when she comes to his court, and watching her try to learn to read might be fun. She spits and swears at him as he disappears into the shadows again. Feyre feels completely beaten down by it all. Probably not helped by the fact that she hasn't seen the sun in months. Maybe our girl's got a touch of seasonal affective disorder. Things get so bad, she actually looks forward to the wine for a bit of an escape. She's given up even trying to solve the riddle. She's obviously too stupid. She's completely lost hope. One evening, when she's walking to the dressing chamber with the shadow servants, they dive behind a tapestry just as the Atter turns a corner into the corridor. He has someone with him whose voice Feyre doesn't recognise, and she can't see them, but he must be scary if he's wandering around casually with the Atter. They're talking about Amarantha, saying the King of Highburn is angry with her because he's asking her to come to his aid, but she's too distracted by the girl. Whatever plans the king has made to conquer the mortal world seem to be imminent. Feyre's a bit scared, but she knows there's absolutely nothing she can realistically do about it, especially not from down here. One day, she's lying on the floor of her cell, feeling sorry for herself, when she starts hallucinating this music, and she gets, lifted up into the clouds in her dream, and then it fills her with hope again. It was a whole chapter long, it was weird, but she's done moping now, and she's ready to take on the final challenge. But before that, she has one last party to go to. The night begins like any other. Feyre is painted and dressed, and then Rhysand leads her down to the throne room where loads of high fae are dancing to loud music. Usually Feyre's led over to the wine pretty quickly, but tonight Rhysand is distracted by a fairy dancing around him. Feyre stands with her back to a wall and takes the opportunity to scan the room for Tamlin, but he's not in the throne next to Amarantha. Her questions are answered quickly when a familiar presence appears beside her, facing out towards the crowd. His fingers brush hers and her eyes fill with tears. Just as quickly as he appeared, he disappears. But then she spots him in a small doorway half hidden by a tapestry. He's staring straight at her, and he tilts his head, inviting her to follow him. She doesn't need to be told twice. She tries her best to look as bored as possible while casually strolling across the room. She knows they don't have long before Rhysand comes looking for her. As soon as the door closes behind them, Tamlin slams into her and they're all over each other. Things are getting really hot and heavy, but then they hear a cough from behind them. Rhysand emerges from the shadows. "Look at what you've done to my pet," he says. "You're what? Sorry, I hate this." Tamlin dresses himself again, tells Feyre he loves her, and then steps back out into the throne room. Rhysand tells Feyre if she was that desperate, she could have always asked him. She calls him a pig. He says she's a fool. They both are. Did they not think through what would have happened if Amarantha had found them? "What do you care?" Feyre asks. "What do I care?" he replies. "Oh, I don't have his wings right now." Then his wings shoot out behind him, and then he slams himself into Feyre, kissing her with tongues. Seconds later, the door is flung wide open. Amarantha stands in the doorway with Tamlin just behind her. You can tell from his expression that he's seen what was happening. Amarantha laughs and Tamlin turns his face to stone. Rhysand lets go of Feyre. He's grinning. Amarantha speaks to Durian's eye on her finger, saying she knew it was only a matter of time before Feyre betrayed Tamlin. All humans are the same. She's seen everything she needs to, so Amarantha leaves them to it, with Tamlin on her tail. Feyre looks down at her body. The paint is smeared all over her, and it's all over Rhysand too, who seems angry with her. Did he do that just to stop Amarantha figuring out that Feyre had been with Tamlin? He tells Feyre to go back to her cell. Hours later, Rhysand materialises in front of her. This is how the conversation goes. "What do you want?" "A moment of peace and quiet." "From what?" "From this mess. That damn bitch is running me..." Sorry. "That damn bitch is running me ragged. You hate me. Imagine how you'd feel if I made you serve in my bedroom. I'm High Lord of the Night Court, not a harlot." Oh my god, the rumors are true. He actually is Amarantha's whore. Non-derogatory. That's actually really horrible. She asks why he's telling her all of this, thinking he's acting weirdly genuine. He says he's tired and lonely, and she's the only person he can talk to without putting himself at risk. He's hoping that if Feyre can pass the last trial tomorrow and break the curse, Tamlin will get his full powers back. He's been working on winding Tamlin up as much as he physically can to make him angry enough that as soon as that happens, he can absolutely obliterate Amarantha, and then all of the other High Lord's powers will be restored too. So that's what he's been up to the whole time. He's been playing the long game. I like it. He tells Feyre that's why he's never touched her inappropriately. It's the only claim he has to innocence, and his chance to prove to Tamlin that they are on the same side before he takes him out as well. That's good of you. He reassures Feyre, "I would have liked to enjoy you." Okay, while we're being a decent person, have we thought about consent? Feyre asks why Amarantha made him her whore. There must be better wording for that, surely. He replies, "Beyond the obvious." "Yeah, we get it, you're stunning." He explains that his father actually killed Tamlin's family. Oh shit. Amarantha was good friends with Tamlin's dad, so she wanted to get back at the Night Court. Feyre realises something. She says, "When you healed my arm, you didn't need to bargain with me. You could have claimed every single week of the year. Why?" He says, "I know," and then disintegrates back into the shadows. The day of the final challenge arrives, and the guard throws Feyre's old tunic into her cell. It stinks, absolutely reeks, but she's not about to do a trial in this, is she? She's taken to the throne room, and the crowd is huge, but everyone is dead silent. Probably because they're all holding their noses because she smells so fucking bad. Or because all their fates rest on her and they're worried about it. Could go either way. Who am I to put words in their mouth? Amarantha smiles at Feyre and says, "It'll be so horrible for you to fail now that you're so close." She waits for laughter from the crowd, but it doesn't come. They've all passed out at the smell. Sorry, I will stop now. I think I'm becoming a bit delirious. Amarantha asks if she has any last words, and Feyre looks at Tamlin. "I love you. No matter what she says about it, no matter if it's only with my insignificant human heart, even when they burn my body, I'll love you," she says, with tears streaming down her face. Tamlin, you guessed it, doesn't react. She feels fairly certain she's going to die today, and she finds it weirdly comforting that the fairies seem to be rooting for her. She won't feel so alone in her final moments now. Amarantha claps her hands to signal the beginning of the trial. The doors at the end of the room swing open. and 3 people walk in with their hands tied together and bags over their heads. These are meant to be bags, not Pop-Tarts. 3 fairy servants follow behind them, each holding a pillow with an ashwood dagger on top. To pass this challenge, Feyre has to stab each of the prisoners in the heart. Amarantha tells her they are all completely innocent. Not that it should make any difference, because she didn't care about that when she killed the wolf in the forest, and Jurian didn't care about it when he killed her sister either. This one is simple. Kill 3 innocents and live, or refuse and die. Feyre feels physically sick. She doesn't think she can do this. But then again, if she doesn't, far more than 3 people will be damned forever. She lists off the names in her head of all the people who would remain enslaved if she doesn't go through with this. She feels a surge of courage and picks up the dagger, but before she can plunge it into the first innocent heart, the guard snatches the hood off the stranger's head. He's high fae, white, young by the looks of things. Feyre's never met him before, but he looks her right in the eyes and says, "Please, don't." Feyre tries to reason with herself. Even if she doesn't kill this boy, he'll probably never be free again anyway. He cries and pleads, but Feyre knows she has to do it. She stabs him in the chest, letting out a huge sob herself as the dagger plunges into his heart. She hears a cry from somewhere in the crowd. He had a family, but she can't think about that right now. His blood showers Feyre and he looks at her with shock and hate in his eyes until he stops breathing. Amarantha shouts down, "Very good, now the next." "Oh, don't look so miserable, Feyre. Aren't you having fun?" The hood is pulled off Feyre's second victim to be. This time it's a woman who looks not too dissimilar to Feyre herself. She wishes she could tell the innocent woman that she's sorry and that her death won't be in vain. The woman starts to pray, and Feyre recognises the words because Tamlin had spoken them quietly while that fairy from the summer court was dying in the manor, so it must be some sort of funeral prayer. Feyre sobs and tells her she's sorry, but the woman doesn't react. She continues reciting the prayer as if she's accepted her fate. She nods at Feyre seconds before the dagger pierces her chest. Feyre can't take all this. There's no coming back from this now. She is actually a murderer. She will never be able to undo all of this, and there is still one person to go. There is only one more person left between Feyre and freedom. One more murder. Feyre thinks that once Tamlin and the Spring Court are free to go, she might swing a dagger one last time into her own heart so she doesn't have to live with the memory of what she's done. The last dagger is offered to Feyre. I don't know why she needed 3 separate daggers, but she picks it up weakly. The hood is pulled off the final figure, and Feyre thinks she's going to be sick. The face staring back at her is Tamlin's. She shoots a look over at the throne where Tamlin sat, stone-faced as ever, but how can he be in 2 places at once? Amarantha laughs evilly and clicks her fingers. Feyre blinks, and suddenly the Ator sits where Tamlin had been. So the real Tamlin is the one in front of her, the one she now has to kill for her freedom. Could you kill his haircut while you're at it as well? Thanks. Something wrong? Amarantha asks. Feyre tells her this isn't fair. Even Rhysand has gone pale watching the whole thing unravel in horror. Tamlin's eyes burn into hers as if he's trying to tell her something, but he can't find the words. Feyre remembers something Alice had said, that there was one final part of the curse she still hadn't been told. She still didn't know what that was. She told Feyre to listen to what she'd heard, as if she'd already learned something that could help her work it out. Feyre racks her brains thinking through everything she's learned about Prithian. One memory in particular stands out to her. It's the day she first came across the Ator in the garden. Tamlin had hidden her, told her to stay still, and then led the Ator right towards her. He could easily have led it further away. That would probably have been safer. But maybe he was hoping she would overhear something that might help. Then there was another time when him and Lucien were talking about the curse in the dining room. They'd acted as if it was a private conversation, yet they'd left the doors wide open, and they didn't speak quietly. Could he have been sending her a message then too? She sifts through the conversations for anything that matches up, and there is one similarity. Lucien had said, "For someone with a heart of stone, yours is certainly soft these days. Someone with a heart of stone, yours is certainly soft these days." And the Ator had said, "Though you have a heart of stone, Tamlin, you certainly keep a host of fear inside it." Heart of stone. Maybe stabbing Tamlin in the heart wouldn't actually kill him. It's a huge risk to take, but thinking about it, Amarantha is obsessed with Tamlin. Surely she would never risk Feyre actually killing him. Then she could never have him for herself either. Feyre flicks through her memories, looking for any other evidence that she might be right. That night they spent together before Feyre had left the manor, she couldn't remember ever hearing his heartbeat. Tamlin watches Feyre's face intently. He lifts his chin, inviting her to do it. She stands over Tamlin and watches a subtle smile form on his face. She tells him she loves him, and she stabs him in the chest. Tamlin cries out in pain. His bones crack beneath the dagger, but then there is a faint thud, and when Feyre pulls the dagger back out, the tip is bent backwards. She drops it to the floor. Tamlin pants and pushes his hand against his wound. He's healing, but too slowly, and his mask is still very much on his face. She's very bothered about that. People in the crowd are yelling, "She won!" and "Free them!" So Amarantha responds, "I'll free them whenever I see fit." Feyre didn't specify when I had to free them, just that I had to, at some point. She then turns to Feyre and announces, "I'm going to kill you." Well, nice of her to let her know. Feyre's body crashes to the floor as if she has been struck by lightning. Her bones are breaking as she's slammed repeatedly against the stone floor by an invisible force. Amarantha screams, "Admit you don't really love him and I'll spare you. Admit what a cowardly, lying and constant bit of human garbage you actually are." But Feyre won't. She hasn't been through all of this to prove her love to Tamlin, just to undermine herself now. She would rather die. She thrashes around, writhing in pain on the floor as Amarantha keeps shrieking. "What are you compared to our kind that you think you're worthy of us? You're all pigs. Screaming, filthy pigs." Rhysand darts up behind Amarantha and launches the ash dagger at her throat. She lifts her hand and magically intercepts him as if it's nothing. He is blasted by a wall of light and knocked backwards. He tries again, but this time he's pushed back with such force, his head cracks against the stone and he drops the dagger. She calls him a traitorous beast and repeatedly attacks him until Feyre begs her to stop. His gaze locks with hers, and suddenly she can see himself through his eyes for a split second before snapping back to her own perspective. Interesting. New power unlocked. Amarantha sends another huge surge of pain through her, so strong she nearly loses consciousness. Rhysand shouts her name and she hears Amarantha barking at her to say she doesn't love Tamlin, but she won't say it. It's the only thing she has left to hold on to. Feyre can tell she's going to die, and from the look in Tamlin's eyes, she can see he knows it too. He pleads with Amarantha to let Feyre go, but he's so weak, he's no real threat to her. Feyre remembers now that back when she'd first struck up the deal with Amarantha, she'd put a weird amount of emphasis on the fact that if she solved the riddle, they would be free instantly. That makes more sense now, knowing her plan was never to actually set them free because she hadn't set a timeline. Feyre desperately wishes she'd tried harder to solve the riddle, and then, suddenly, out of thin air, the answer comes to her. It's love. The answer to the riddle is love. Oh my god, are you joking? That is the cringiest thing I've ever heard. Feyre shouts out the answer, just as Amarantha's magic cracks her spine. The next thing Feyre knows, she's looking at herself through Rhysand's eyes again. She can see herself and she can see her neck is cracked at an unnatural angle. It doesn't look good. Rhysand rises from his position on the floor, which is now cracked and bloody. He glances at the crowd and Feyre sees Lucien remove his mask at last. Hang on. He's mask free! Finally! Can't quite believe it. Then Rhysand turns to look at Tamlin, who is staring wordlessly at Feyre's lifeless body. He turns to face Amarantha. Can he stop turning to face people? I don't have enough hands. Who backs away and whispers, "Please." When Feyre had given the answer to the riddle, the curse had been broken. Tamlin must have his powers back now, and Amarantha is no match for him. He shifts into his beast form and lunges at her, gripping her by the neck. Amarantha tries to fight back, but her efforts don't even seem to touch Tamlin. Meanwhile, the ACOTAR and some of her more loyal followers try to reach her, but they're intercepted by fairies from the crowd. This is full-scale chaos. Lucien shouts Tamlin's name and throws a sword through the air towards him. Presumably he has hands again because he catches it with ease and then he drives it straight through Amarantha's skull before ripping her throat out with his teeth. Also, maybe he is still the beast. Either way, she is now dead. The room falls completely silent. Tamlin reverts back, to his human form. Right, he reverts back to his human form and he slumps to the ground next to Feyre's broken body. He sobs and cradles her. The whole room just watches. Then a man whose face matches Lucien's walks towards Tamlin. This must be Lucian's father, the High Lord of the Autumn Court. He extends a hand and a spark rolls off it and onto Feyre. Then 2 more High Lords approach. The High Lord of the Summer Court and the High Lord of the Winter Court. Don't talk to me about how long all this embellishment took when you can clearly see there's hardly any of the video left. You can't say I don't make an effort. They too drop sparks onto Feyre and then step back to allow the High Lords of the Dawn Court and the Day Court to step in. Here they are. Just a moment for them, please, because that is their only screen time. Lastly, Rhysand steps forward. He says, "For what she gave, we will bestow what our predecessors have granted to few before. This makes us even." He sprinkles some light onto her, and then Tamlin does the same and gives her a big smooch. Feyre gasps, air filling her lungs, and she's back in her own body. She's not even in any pain. The crowd gasps. She pushes herself up to stand, and she feels taller. Looking at her hands, her skin looks different. It glows. Oh my god, she's been turned into one of the High Fae. She's immortal now. How very Bella Swan of her. Tamlin's mask finally comes off, and luckily, she still fancies him. How could you not, with luscious locks like that? The curse is broken. Amarantha is dead. Feyre did kill those 2 innocent people and she feels really bad about that. But now she can go and spend the rest of her immortal existence with her gorgeous boyfriend. So really, it all worked out for the best. And that, my friends, is the story of A Court of Thorns and Roses. I enjoyed it actually a lot more than I thought I would. There are 5 so far in the series and I am going to read the second one. Will I make a video about it? That depends how many new characters there are, because there's only a certain number of hours I, a self-respecting 30-year-old woman, can spend making felt finger puppets. But if this video does well, and it seems to be something you guys want, I will consider it. Say if this gets 100,000 views. Okay. Yeah, oh, all right, that's the benchmark. So like this video if you enjoyed it, share it with your friends, hype it. That's a new thing. I don't really know how it works, but apparently it's good. And definitely subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one. I do also want to say a huge thank you to my friend Jess, who helped me make these godforsaken puppets. I actually think I would have gone insane without her help, so everyone say thank you to Jess. And she has actually posted a vlog on her channel of the behind the scenes of us making all of these. 4 Naga, and we need Velcro.
Oh, more sparklies.
We kind of don't need them.
No, we don't, but they are fun. Oh my god, look, it's the one that chases her. Perfect.
It looks a lot smilier than that one.
Oh, there you go, King of High
I
Burn.
always look so good at that.
Yeah.
I like round noses. Brain whirring. I'm going to be here forever just doing this.
Like a speck of dust floating in the woods. I don't think it's going to take very long for us to like descend into madness. That one brain cell that we share as well. Working overtime.
She's putting in a shift today. I'm going in with confidence.
Okay, I like that about you.
I'll just hack more off. Making a felt puppet look remotely sexy is quite
Really
a challenge.
hard.
And then she wears this dress that like really leaves
Nothing to the
imagination.
Shrouded in mystery, aren't they? Let's make some puppets.
Love this. Okay. So I'll link that below just in case any of you want to spend any more time with these things. This video wasn't long enough already. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that absolute chaos. And if this was your first impression of me, I can only apologise.